Here is a thing almost no one tells you, and it is true, and it is the doorway into everything else. To the people who invented writing, the Sumerians, in the hot flat country between two rivers, 5,000 years ago, the moon was not the lesser light. The moon was not the sun's pale companion, borrowing its brightness, ruling only the leftover hours. To them the moon came first. The moon was the elder. The moon was, in the family of the sky, the father, and the sun was his son. I want to sit with you in the dark tonight and walk through what they saw when they looked up, because they looked up more carefully, and for longer, and with more at stake than almost anyone who has lived since. They gave the moon a name, Nana in the old Sumerian, Suan, and then simply Sin in the language of Babylon that came after. And they wrote that name, sometimes, as nothing but a number. The number 30, because the moon was the 30 days of its own cycle made into a god, the great counter, the one who measured out the month with his own body, waxing and thinning and vanishing and returning over and over, the most reliable clock in the ancient world hanging right there in the sky where anyone could read it. And they said things about him. They said he crossed the night in a boat, the great boat of heaven they called it, while the sun, his child, got only the small boat. They said he hid his face and returned. They said the sky he travelled through was solid, a ceiling of stone, and they described what it was made of. They said that when he darkened and vanished into blood and shadow, he was being attacked, besieged by 7 demons in the vault of heaven, and that this was the most dangerous omen a king could receive. And they built in his honour in the city of one of the largest structures in the entire ancient world, a great stepped mountain of brick, so that the lamp of the night would have a house. 7 things they carved about the moon, and here is the promise I am going to make you, and keep all the way through, because it is the whole reason this channel exists, and the whole reason I would rather you fell asleep to my voice than to someone else's. I am not going to tell you the moon is a hollow spaceship. I am not going to tell you the ancients had secret knowledge of the cosmos that science has covered up. That is a lie, and it is a lie that a great many people are being sold right now, tonight, on this very subject. And I find it a little sad, because the truth is so much better. The truth is that these people watched the same moon you can see from your own window, and they did not know the physics. They had no idea why the phases happened, no idea what the moon was made of, no idea it was slowly drifting away from them. And yet, again and again, the things they noticed and named and worshipped turn out to sit right next to something real, something modern. Science has only recently been able to prove, so that the ancient image and the modern fact end up looking like 2 translations of the same sentence. That is the honest frame, and it is the beautiful one. 2 true things side by side. What they saw and what is actually there. And I think that frame is worth holding on to for a reason beyond tonight, because it is a rare and gentle way to look at the past. It is easy to be smug about ancient people, to hear that they thought the sky was made of stone, and the moon was a god, and an eclipse was a demon, and to feel superior, to file them under primitive, and move on. And it is just as easy to go the other way, the way the people selling you lies do, to decide the ancients had secret cosmic knowledge we have lost, that their myths were coded science, that the tablets hide truths the experts are hiding from you. Both of those are lazy, and both of them are wrong, and the truth is more interesting than either. The truth is that they were exactly as intelligent as you are, working with almost nothing, no telescopes, no clocks, no spacecraft, no way to leave the ground, and that with only their eyes and their patience and their minds, they watched the sky so closely and thought about it so hard that they got the appearances astonishingly right, even while they got the explanations wrong. They are neither fools to look down on, nor sages to worship. They are us earlier, with less to work with, doing the best that could be done. And when you hold their picture of the moon beside ours, you are not measuring their failure. You are watching the same species across 5,000 years, looking up at the same light, and slowly, honestly, figuring it out. So that is what we will do. 7 things the moon does, to the sky, to the earth, to time itself, each one opening with what the oldest astronomers on Earth carved about it, and closing with what we now know is actually happening up there. And then at the very end, when you're most of the way to sleep, the 8th thing, the one that is not about the Earth at all, the one that is about you specifically, lying here in the dark, the small, strange, faintly measurable thing the moon may be doing to you tonight, in this very hour, as it has done to every human being who ever tried to sleep beneath it. And you do not need to hold on to any of it. Let me say that clearly, because it matters more than any fact I will give you. There is no test at the end of this. You will not be asked to remember the name of a single god or a single tablet or a single scientist, though I will name all of them carefully, one at a time, because naming your sources is the only honest way to tell a story like this. You do not have to follow the thread. You are allowed to lose it, to drift out and drift back, to fall asleep somewhere over Babylon and wake somewhere near the far side of the moon, and have missed nothing that will be held against you. That drifting is the entire point of my being here, to talk slowly, in an even and unhurried voice, about something genuinely old and genuinely true, in a way you can sink down through and out of. I am a real person. I have read the things I'm going to tell you about, and I have tried very hard to keep the real separate from the invented, to give you the actual tablets and the actual science, and to tell you plainly every time when something is solid, when something is merely likely, when serious people still argue about it, and when something is simply false, however old and beautiful the false thing might be. When I get to the part where people will try to sell you a lie about the moon, I will stop and show you the lie and take it apart gently, and then we will go on. That is the deal. Everything else you can let go of. So settle in however you are lying right now is fine. Let your eyes do what they want to do. Let the weight go out of your shoulders and your jaw and the small muscles around your eyes that have been working since you woke up. Whatever you did not finish today will still be there in the morning, and the morning will be soon enough for it. There is nothing in the next 3 hours that asks anything of your body at all, and if it helps you settle, let this be the first soft thought to rest on, that the moon above you right now, whether it is up in your sky tonight or down below the far horizon, is the very same moon they watched. Not a similar one, the same one. The same grey face, the same dark seas, the same craters, the same light. The moon that hangs over your roof is the identical body that hung over the ziggurat of while the priests waited for its crescent. The same one that darkened over Babylon and sent a king into hiding. The same one the first poet sang to. It has barely changed in all that time. A still dead faithful world, holding its face to us, drifting away so slowly that across 5,000 years of human watching, it has moved only a couple of 100 meters farther off. So when you look at the moon, you are not looking at something like what they saw. You are looking at the exact thing, the one unbroken object that every human who ever lived has shared. And tonight, it is yours to fall asleep beneath, as it was theirs, connected to all of them by nothing more than a single, old light in the dark. We're going to start at the beginning, with the first god of the night, the elder light, the father of the sun, with who the Sumerians thought the moon was, and then with the almost unbelievable thing that modern science now says the moon actually is and where it actually came from. In a beginning so violent, it makes their myths look gentle. Because they thought the moon was born a god, we think it was born in a collision that nearly destroyed the world. Start with the strangeness of it, because it resets everything you assume about how ancient people saw the sky. We tend to imagine that every early culture worshipped the sun, the great giver of light and warmth and harvest, the obvious king of the heavens. And many did, but not in the way you would expect the Sumerians. In the oldest layer of their thought, the senior light, the elder of the sky, the one from whom the others descended, was the moon. His name was Nana. That is the Sumerian. In the language of the Akkadians and Babylonians who came after and inherited the gods, he became Suan, and then worn smooth by centuries of speaking, simply Sin. And here is the first detail I love, because it tells you how deep the moon ran in their minds. When a scribe wanted to write his name in the shorthand of the gods, each great god had a sacred number. The number they gave the moon was 30. Just 30. And so you can find, on tablets 4,000 years old, the moon god written as a single numeral, the way you might write a name as initials, 30, standing in for the god, because the moon was the 30 days of the month made flesh, made divine, the counter of time walking across the sky in his own slow, unmistakable rhythm. They gave him a family, and the shape of that family is the whole point. Nana was the firstborn son of Enlil, the great god of the air and the storm, the ruler of the pantheon. Though I should be honest and tell you that this parentage seems to have been formalized, made official, under the kings of the third dynasty of Ur, for reasons that were partly political, so it is better to say the moon came to be regarded as Enlil's son than to say he always and eternally was. But once fixed, the genealogy said something enormous, because Nana the moon had children of his own, and his children were the other lights. His son was Utu, Shamash in Akkadian, the sun, and his daughter was Inanna Ishtar, the bright planet we call Venus. The sun and the morning star were the moon's children. The moon was the father, and they said it in the sky itself, in a phrase I want you to hear, because it settles the matter beyond any argument. They called Nana the great boat of heaven, the moon as a boat, a barge, a skiff riding across the black water of the night. And they called the sun, his son, the small boat of heaven, the great boat and the small boat, the father's vessel and the child's. The rank is written right into the metaphor. The moon is not the lesser light borrowing from the greater. In their sky, the moon is the greater, and the sun is the one who came after. Now, I do not want to overstate this because the honesty is the whole point. It does not mean they ignored the sun or thought the sun unimportant. Utu, the sun, was a mighty and deeply loved god, the god of justice, the all-seeing one who looked down and witnessed every deed and judged it. The light from whom nothing could hide, he mattered enormously. What I am telling you is narrower and stranger than sun worship versus moon worship. It is simply that in the ranking of the astral family, the moon sat above the sun and fathered it. That is genuinely how they arranged the heavens. The elder light was the one that ruled the dark. Let me give you the picture of him in something close to their own cadence. Imagine a great god, seated, with a long beard of deep blue lapis lazuli, and above him, riding the sky like the horns of a bull, the bright curved crescent, his boat, his symbol, his very shape. He is the lamp of the night. He is the one who makes the months. He is the father who causes the herds to multiply and the reed beds to grow. He rises thin as a fingernail after his time of darkness, and he fattens night by night into the full round disk, and then he wastes away again, and vanishes, and is reborn forever, the most faithful returning thing in their entire world. That is Nana. That is who they thought was up there, and they built him a house that you can still stand in front of today. In the city of Ur, in the far south of what is now Iraq, the same Ur we have spoken of before, the city of the great cemetery. The moon god was the divine ruler, the patron, the lord of the city. His sacred precinct was called the Ekishnugal, which means something like the house of the great light. And within it, around 2100 years before the Common Era, a king named Ur-Nammu, the same Ur-Nammu whose death and descent into the underworld we followed in another of these long nights, raised for the moon a vast stepped tower of mud brick, faced with fired brick set in bitumen, a ziggurat, an artificial mountain, climbing toward the sky in enormous stages. It bore a ceremonial name that means roughly the house whose foundation is clothed in ore. Its lowest stage and its great staircases still stand in the desert. It was, and its ruins remain, one of the most impressive things the ancient world built, and it was built as a temple to the moon, so that the lamp of the night would have somewhere on earth to come home to, and it was at Ur in the service of this moon god and his daughter that the first author in all of human history known to us by name did her work, a woman named Enheduanna, daughter of Sargon of Akkad, high priestess of the moon, who composed hymns some 4,300 years ago that still survive, the earliest poetry we can attach to a real, named human being. The first named author on earth was a priestess of the moon. That is not nothing. That is how central this god was, and his worship did not stay in the south, and it did not die quickly. Far to the north, in a city called Haran, on the caravan roads of what is now the border of Turkey and Syria, the moon god had a second great home, and there he was called the Lord of Haran, and his temple there became one of the most stubborn and long-lived cult centres in all of antiquity. The kings of Assyria honoured him there. Centuries later, a Babylonian king named Nabonidus, the last king of Babylon, the one on the throne when the Persians came, was so devoted to the moon god of Haran that he neglected the other gods and spent years away from his own capital tending the lunar cult, which may have helped cost him his kingdom. And even after that, even after Babylon fell and the old gods faded and new religions swept across the world, the moon cult at Haran hung on, quietly, for something like another 1,000 years, worshippers of the old lunar god still keeping his rites while empires rose and fell around them. The lamp of the night held its worshippers longer than almost any other god of that ancient world. Something about him did not let go, and people did not let go of him. And I want to linger for a moment on that first poet, Enheduanna, because she is one of the most remarkable figures in the whole human record, and almost no one has heard her name. She was a real woman, the daughter of Sargon of Akkad, the first empire builder in history, and her father appointed her high priestess of the moon god at Ur, a position of enormous power, part religious, part political, binding the conquered south to the throne through the cult of Nana. And she composed hymns to the temples and a great, passionate first-person poem to the goddess Inanna, the moon's daughter, and crucially, she signed her work. She put herself into it. She wrote, I, Enheduanna, and described her own exile and her own restoration and her own devotion, and in doing so became the first author in all of history whose name we know attached to their words. Not a king boasting on a monument, a poet, a priestess, a woman, 4,300 years ago, saying I and meaning herself. And she did it in the service of the moon. When you think of the beginning of literature, of the first individual human voice to reach across time and say, here I am, this is what I felt, it comes to us from the temple of the moon god at Ur. The lamp of the night did not only get the first great tower, it got the first named voice. And that tower deserves a word too, because of what they thought it was for. A ziggurat was not a temple you went inside, like a church or a mosque. It was solid, a mountain of brick, with a small shrine at the very top. It was, in their understanding, a meeting place, a stairway, a bridge between the earth below and the heaven above, a place where the god could descend to meet his city, and the city could reach up toward its god. They built an artificial mountain so that the distance between the human and the divine, between the ground and the moon god's heaven, might be a little shorter at one sacred point, the house whose foundation is clothed in awe. They raised it toward the sky because that is where the god was, crossing over in his boat every night, and they wanted to be nearer to him, to give him a landing, a home, a stair. It is one of the oldest impulses there is. Made in mud brick on a scale you can still see from a distance across the desert, to build upward, toward the light in the sky, to close the gap. Picture the range of his images, because they carved him again and again. The crescent, always laid on its back like a boat, or standing like the horns of a bull, and indeed the bull was his animal, the great horned beast whose curved horns echoed the curve of the new moon. A god enthroned, bearded, dignified, with the crescent riding above or beside him. He was called Father and Lord and King of and the one who makes the light and the fruit that renews itself. This last because he grew back every month from nothing. The self-renewing light, the God who could not be permanently killed. To a people who watched everything else die and stay dead, the moon was the great exception, the nightly proof that vanishing was not always final. So, compress it down to the one shape you can keep if you keep anything. To the first people who wrote, the moon was the elder light, the father of the sun, the great boat crossing the night, the counter of all time, worshipped in a brick mountain in the desert, sung to by the first poet whose name we know. The moon came first. Here is why that matters. Here is why I am not just telling you an old story, because they were more right than they had any way of knowing, and they were right in a way that would have astonished them. They put the moon first, yet first in rank, first in the family, the elder of the lights. And it turns out that in the actual history of this planet, the moon does come first, in a sense that is almost unbearably dramatic. The moon is not a gentle companion that has always drifted peacefully beside us. The moon was born in violence, at the very beginning, in a catastrophe so enormous that it remade the earth. And everything you are, everything alive, everything about the world you woke up in this morning, exists downstream of the day the moon was made. Here is the story as our best science now tells it, and I'm going to be careful, as I promised, to tell you exactly how solid each part is. Around 4.5 billion years ago, when the solar system was young, and the Earth was a molten, half-finished thing, still gathering itself out of the debris of the newborn sun, there was another world sharing our orbit. A whole separate planet, roughly the size of Mars, and astronomers have given it a name, Theia, after the Greek titaness who was, fittingly, the mother of the moon goddess. And Theia and the proto-Earth were on a collision course, and they collided. Not a glancing scrape, a catastrophe. Two worlds struck each other, and the impact was so violent that it melted and partly vaporized the outer Earth and destroyed Theia entirely, flinging an immense ring of molten rock and rock vapor out into orbit around the wounded, glowing planet. And out of that ring of debris, over what may have been an astonishingly short time, years perhaps, or centuries, the fragments pulled themselves together under their own gravity and cooled and coalesced into a single new body, hanging in the black beside the Earth, the moon, born from the collision, made from the shattered material of Theia and the Earth mixed together and thrown into the sky. This is called the giant impact hypothesis, and I want to tell you where it came from and how sure we are. It was proposed in 1975 by two scientists named William Hartmann and Donald Davis in a paper in the journal Icarus, and independently around the same time by another pair, Cameron and Ward. And the evidence that made it the leading explanation came in large part from the moon itself, from the rocks the Apollo astronauts carried home between 1969 and 1972. Because when scientists analysed those rocks, they found two things that fit the collision and almost nothing else. The moon is strangely poor in iron, as if it were made mostly from the outer, rocky layers of a planet and not its metal core. Exactly what you would expect from debris blasted off the Earth's mantle. And the moon's oxygen, measured in its isotopes, its atomic fingerprint, is almost identical to the Earth's, as if the two bodies were made, in large part, from the same material, mixed together in a single event. Now here is where the honesty comes in, and I will not skip it. The giant impact is the leading model. It is the consensus framework, the story nearly all planetary scientists work within. But it is not proven in every detail, and there is a real, live problem with it that has driven a great deal of clever work in the last 20 years. The problem is that the moon and the Earth are, isotopically, almost too alike. If Theia was a separate world, formed elsewhere, It should have had its own distinct fingerprint. And the moon, made largely from Theia, should carry that difference. But it barely does. The moon looks almost purely Earth-like, and so scientists have had to refine the picture. Perhaps the collision was so violent and so hot that the vaporized material of both worlds mixed completely, equilibrated before it condensed into the moon. There is a striking idea from 2018 from researchers named Locke and Stewart of a structure they call a synestia, a vast spinning donut-shaped cloud of vaporized rock that the Earth briefly became after the impact, out of which the moon then condensed like a droplet, forming in a storm. The details are still being argued, so when I tell you the moon was born in a collision, I am telling you the leading, best-supported account we have. Not a thing known blow for blow, but the story the evidence points to, still being sharpened. Let me give you a little more of the picture, because it is worth having in your mind as you drift. This idea took a while to win. When it was first proposed in the 1970s, it was one option among several. Some scientists thought the moon had formed alongside the Earth from the same cloud of debris. Some thought it had formed elsewhere and been captured by the Earth's gravity as it wandered past. Some thought it had been flung off a fast-spinning early Earth. It was at a conference in Hawaii, at Kona, in 1984, that the giant impact idea really pulled ahead of the others, because it explained the things the others could not. The moon's missing iron, the shared fingerprint, the angular momentum of the whole Earth-Moon system. And in the decades since, scientists like Robin Canup have run the collision on computers, simulating the smash in enormous detail, watching in the models how a strike at just the right angle and speed throws exactly the right amount of the right material into orbit to build a moon. And the moon it builds is born close, startlingly close. In the aftermath, the young moon may have hung only a 10th or a 20th of its current distance away, a vast glowing disk filling a huge part of the sky, raising enormous tides on a molten Earth, so near you could have seen it as more than a light, as a place, a looming presence, wheeling overhead. And it has been drawing away, as we will see at the very end, ever since. So the moon did not just come first, it came in fire, and it came close, and everything gentle about it now. The small pale disk, the mild silver light, is the far, cooled, calmed, distant echo of a catastrophe that once filled the sky. And the catastrophe did not only make the moon, it remade the Earth, and some of what it may have given us is the reason there is anyone here to look up at all. The impact is thought to have melted the outer Earth into a global ocean of molten rock, and to have delivered a colossal spin, setting the young Earth turning fast, a day back then only a handful of hours long. It may have helped shape the Earth's core and mantle in ways that keep the planet's inner heat engine running, the engine that drives the magnetic shield we will come to, and the slow churn of the continents. So the same blow that flung up the moon may also have helped give the Earth its spin, its heat, its magnetism, its whole restless living geology. This is why you will sometimes hear people call it a lucky collision. And it is worth saying clearly what that does and does not mean. It does not mean anyone aimed it. It was a random smash between two worlds in a crowded young solar system. The kind of collision that was happening everywhere in that era, most of them just destructive. This one happened to throw up a large, close moon and leave behind a fast-spinning, molten, magnetically alive Earth. And we, who came billions of years later, exist downstream of that particular outcome. And so it looks lucky to us the way the winning ticket looks lucky to the person holding it. But there was no hand. There was a collision and an outcome and a very long time, and then us looking back and calling it fortune. The moon was not sent. The moon fell out of an accident that also happened to wind up the world. And when we finally went and stood on it and brought pieces of it home, the moon confirmed its own origin in the most concrete way. The rocks the Apollo astronauts carried back are not alien, exotic, otherworldly stuff. They are, for the most part, ordinary rock, the kind of rock you find in the Earth's own crust and mantle, which is exactly what you would expect if the moon were made from material blasted off the young Earth. The bright pale highlands that cover most of the moon are made largely of a rock called anorthosite, which floated to the top of the moon's early ocean of magma as it cooled, forming a pale crust by which is why the moon is bright enough to light our nights at all. And the rocks are old, staggeringly old. The oldest moon rocks are around 4.5 billion years old, right back at the birth of the solar system, older than almost any rock surviving on the Earth itself. Because the Earth is a restless, living world that constantly recycles its own crust through erosion and the slow churn of its continents, erasing its ancient surface, while the moon is a dead, still world that has preserved its early face almost untouched. So the moon is, in a strange way, a museum of the beginning, a piece of the young Earth-Moon system, fossilized, hanging in the sky, holding a record of the origin that our own living planet has long since scrubbed away. We went to the moon and found, waiting there in the grey dust, the childhood of our own world. But hold the shape of it against the shape of what they believed, because that is the whole reason we are here. They said the moon came first, the elder, the father, the origin, and modern science says, yes, the moon came first, in the sense that its birth was one of the founding catastrophes of this world, the event that gave the Earth the companion that would, as we will see, hold its climate steady, and its seasons in place, and make the long calm stretches that life needed to become complicated, and eventually to become us. They put the moon at the head of the family for reasons of myth and rank. It belongs at the head of the family for reasons of history and physics. The lamp of the night is older and more important than it looks. They were not wrong about that. They were only wrong about why. And they were wrong too about one other thing, a thing they could not possibly have known. Standing in the desert, looking up, they thought they were seeing the whole of him, the full round face of the god, turning through his phases, showing himself and hiding and showing himself again, but they were only ever seeing half. The moon, it turns out, keeps one side of itself turned away from the Earth, always, and has done so for billions of years, and no human being saw the other side of it until it was photographed from a spacecraft within living memory. They watched the moon hide its face every month and called it death and rebirth. There is a face it hides that they never even knew was there. That is the second thing. The second thing they watched the moon do every single month without fail was disappear and then come back. This was, to them, the great drama of the night sky. Not a small thing, not a curiosity, but the central rhythm around which they built their calendar, their rituals, their sense of time itself. The moon is born thin, a bare sliver of light low in the west, just after sunset. The new crescent that they watched for so eagerly that the first sighting of it was what began each month. It fattens night after night, climbing higher, filling out until it stands full and round and enormous, ruling the whole night, and then it wanes, thinning back down on the other side, rising later and later, until at last it is gone entirely. For a night, sometimes 2 or 3, vanished from the sky, present nowhere, a darkness where the god had been. And then the thin new crescent appears again in the west, and it all begins over. They had a name for the vanishing. In Akkadian it was, roughly, the day of disappearance, the day the moon was nowhere, and they had an idea about where he went. When the moon disappeared from the sky, they imagined, he went down into the netherworld, into the great below, among the dead, into that same dusty land of no return we have walked through before on other nights. The moon god descended into the country of the dead during his dark days, and then rose out of it, renewed, reborn as the fresh crescent. So the monthly cycle was not just light and dark to them, it was death and resurrection, over and over, the most dependable promise the sky could make, that what goes down into the dark comes back. The lamp is extinguished, and the lamp is relit. Nothing is ever finally gone. And they organized their whole lives around this rhythm with a precision that is easy to underestimate. The watching for the new crescent was not casual. It was official, institutional, a matter of state. Trained observers watched the western horizon at sunset at the end of each month, and the first confirmed sighting of the thin new moon was what formally began the next month. The report went up the chain, and the calendar turned. And because the moon is not perfectly regular in when its crescent first becomes visible, it depends on the angle, the season, the clarity of the air. This created a genuine problem of prediction that occupied their astronomers for centuries. Could you say in advance, before you even looked, whether the crescent would be visible tonight or not? Working that out, the geometry of when the young moon would first catch the light low enough and long enough after sunset to be seen, was one of the problems that drove their astronomy forward. So the vanishing and returning of the moon was not just a poetic image of death and rebirth to them. It was the literal engine of their calendar, the thing that had to be watched and, eventually, predicted, the pivot on which their whole reckoning of time turned. The god who died and rose was also the clock that ran the kingdom. And the phase they cared about in a darker way was the vanishing itself. The day or two or three when the moon was simply gone. They called it the day of disappearance, and they filled that absence with meaning, because an absence in the sky, to them, was never just an absence. The moon, in those dark nights, was thought to have gone down among the dead, into the great below, to sit for a while with the departed before climbing back into the world of the living. So the darkest nights of the month, the moonless ones, carried a faint charge of the underworld about them. The god was away, visiting the dead, and the sky above was, for those nights, an emptier and lonelier place. And then the thin new blade of light in the west was his return, his climbing back up out of the country of no return that he alone, of all beings, could leave. I have to be honest with you about the limits of what they understood, because the honesty is the point, and it actually makes the story better rather than worse. They watched all of this with tremendous care. They were, as we will see, extraordinary observers, some of the best the ancient world produced, but they had no idea why it happened. They did not know that the phases are a trick of geometry, that the moon is a ball lit from one side by the sun, and that what changes through the month is only how much of that lit half we can see from our angle. They did not know the moon shines by reflected sunlight at all. They saw the appearance and they named the rhythm, and they wrapped it in a story of a god who dies and returns. They described, they did not explain, and that is not a failure. That is simply where they stood, watching a real pattern in the real sky with genuine attention and reaching for the only kind of understanding they had, which was story. But here is the thing they never knew, the thing hidden inside that vanishing and returning face. And it is one of the strangest facts about the moon, so ordinary once you know it, that people forget how bizarre it actually is. In all those thousands of years of watching, in all the countless nights that all the peoples of the earth spent staring up at the moon, from the Sumerians to the Greeks, to your own grandparents, every single one of them was only ever looking at one side of it, the same side. Always, the moon keeps one face turned toward the earth, permanently, and turns the other face permanently away, so that until the middle of the 20th century, no human eye had ever seen the back of the moon at all. This is called tidal locking or synchronous rotation, and it is worth slowing down on, because it sounds impossible when you first really hear it. The moon does rotate, it spins on its axis, but it spins at exactly the rate it orbits the Earth. It turns around once in precisely the same time it takes to go around us once. And the result of those two motions being perfectly matched is that the same hemisphere always faces inward toward us, and the opposite hemisphere always faces outward into space, away from every human who ever lived. Picture walking in a circle around a lamp in the center of a room, always keeping your face toward the lamp. To do that, You have to turn your own body around once for every lap you walk. Anyone standing at the lamp sees only your face, never your back, the whole way around. That is the moon and the earth. That is what it has been doing, faithfully, for billions of years. Why would it do that? It was not always so. When the moon was young and far closer to the earth than it is now, it spun faster, and it did show us all its sides. But the earth's gravity reached out and raised a bulge in the body of the young, molten moon, a tidal bulge, a slight stretching, and as the moon spun, that bulge was dragged and flexed, and the friction of all that flexing slowly, over immense time, bled away the moon's spin like a brake, until its rotation had slowed to match its orbit exactly, and the bulge settled permanently facing us. And there it locked. The same face ever since. It is one of the most common things in the solar system, this locking. Most of the big moons of the giant planets do it too. But on our own moon, it produced that quietly astonishing fact. A whole half of a world right next door, the nearest object in the heavens, that no one on Earth saw for the entire span of human history until the year 1959. That was when it changed. In October of 1959, a small Soviet spacecraft called Luna 3 swung around behind the moon and did the thing no human being and no human instrument had ever done. It photographed the far side. It sent back the first grainy, blurry images of the face the moon had been hiding from us, since before there were eyes to hide it from. And it was different, more rugged, more cratered, almost entirely lacking the great dark smooth plains that mark the side we know. A whole hidden landscape, finally seen, after all those thousands of years of watching the moon vanish and return, and never once suspecting there was a back to it. And when we finally saw it, the strangest thing about the far side was how different it looked from the face we know. The near side of the moon, the one every human in history had gazed at, has those great dark smooth patches. The ones people see as the face of the man in the moon, or a rabbit, or a woman carrying sticks. Those dark plains are called Maria, from the Latin for seas, because early astronomers thought they might be oceans. They are actually vast ancient floods of dark volcanic rock that welled up and filled enormous impact basins billions of years ago. The near side is nearly a third covered in them. But the far side, when Luna 3 and later missions showed it to us, has almost none. It is a rugged, pale, endlessly cratered highland, crowded with impact scars, with hardly any of the dark smooth seas at all. The two hemispheres of the moon barely look like the same world. Scientists are still working out exactly why. It seems to involve the crust being thicker on the far side, so that the molten rock could not break through and flood the surface there, as it did on the side facing us. But whatever the cause, it means the moon has been showing us all along, its calmer, darker, sea-covered face, and keeping its rough, bright, battered face turned away, as if it had a public side and a private one, and had chosen, before there was anyone to choose for, to show us only the one. And there is a small dizziness worth sitting with in how ordinary this fact is and how bizarre it actually is. You have looked at the moon your whole life. Everyone you love has looked at the moon. Every human being who has ever lived, in every land, in every century, looked up at the moon. And all of them, all of us, saw the same face. The same craters, the same dark seas, the same man, the same rabbit. Never once in all those billions of pairs of eyes across all those thousands of years did anyone catch the moon from behind. It turned with us, it kept step, it held its face to us with a faithfulness we never even noticed because it never once broke, until we left the earth and flew around the back of it and looked. The most familiar object in the night sky kept half of itself, a secret from the entire human race, until 60-odd years ago. You are among the first few generations of humans who have ever seen the whole moon. Hold that softly as you drift. How much even the most ordinary things can be hiding, in plain sight, faithfully, the whole time. And because everyone saw the same face, everyone made pictures out of it. The same dark markings, read 1,000 ways by 1,000 peoples. We in much of the West see a man in the moon, a face gazing down. But others looked at those same dark seas and saw a rabbit crouched, its ears laid back. A reading you find across East Asia and the Americas, so widespread it is almost eerie. Others saw a woman, or a toad, or a man carrying a bundle of sticks, banished to the moon for some transgression. The markings never change. They are the same Maria we now know are frozen lava floods. But every culture that ever lived poured its own stories into them, its own faces and animals and exiles, the way you might find shapes in a fire. The moon is a kind of shared ink blot for the whole species, hung in the sky, the one image every human being has looked at and been invited to fill with meaning, and they could all do it precisely because the moon holds still, because it shows the same face forever, so that the rabbit is always the same rabbit, and the man is always the same man, and your ancestors and theirs could all point up at the identical markings and pass the stories down. There is one more small thing the moon does to the watching mind, and it is worth knowing because it is a genuine little mystery of your own perception. Sometimes rising over the horizon, the full moon looks enormous, swollen close, hanging huge over the rooftops or the hills, and then hours later, high overhead, it looks ordinary, small, its usual coin. You have surely noticed it, and here is the strange part. The moon has not changed size at all. Measure it, photograph it, and the horizon, moon and the overhead moon are exactly the same width. The hugeness is not in the sky, it is in you, a trick of the mind called the moon illusion, and remarkably, after thousands of years of people noticing it, scientists still do not fully agree on why it happens. Something about the horizon, the objects near it, the way your brain judges distance and size against the landscape makes the low moon swell in your perception, while the sky measures it unchanged. So even the size of the moon, the most basic thing about how it looks to you, is partly a thing your own brain is doing, not a thing the moon is doing. They watched it, and it was never quite only outside them. It never is. And here is something they saw every month and could not have explained, that has a lovely explanation, one that the moon and the earth share between them, like a conversation of light. When the moon is a thin crescent, low after sunset, look closely, and you can often see the rest of it, the dark part, the unlit portion, glowing faintly, softly, a dim grey ghost of the full disk cradled inside the bright arc of the crescent. The old poets called it the old moon in the new moon's arms, and for thousands of years no one knew what lit that ashen glow. It was Leonardo da Vinci, around 500 years ago, who worked it out, and the answer is beautiful. That faint light on the dark part of the moon is earthshine. It is sunlight that struck the earth, bounced off our oceans and clouds, travelled up to the moon, and reflected faintly back to us. When the moon is a thin crescent to us, the earth, seen from the moon, is nearly full, a huge, brilliant blue-white disk flooding the lunar night with reflected light, an earthlight far brighter on the moon than moonlight ever is on earth. So the dim glow on the dark of the moon is our own planet's light, sent up and returned. The moon they watched was, in part, lit by the earth they stood on. The two worlds were passing light back and forth across the gap the whole time, and no one knew, and you can still see it any clear evening when the crescent is young, the earth quietly, lighting the dark face of the moon. And the face they watched so faithfully is, we now know, a face of almost perfect stillness, a dead, silent, changeless world, so different from our own restless planet that it is hard to hold in the mind. The moon has essentially no atmosphere, no air, no wind, no weather, no sound. No rain has ever fallen there, no cloud has ever crossed it, no sound has ever travelled across its surface, because there is no air to carry one. Its days are scorching, and its nights are colder than almost anything on Earth, with nothing to hold the heat. And because there is no wind and no water to wear things away, the moon barely changes. The footprints the astronauts left in the lunar dust more than 50 years ago are still there, exactly as they were pressed, sharp-edged, and perfect, and they will remain there undisturbed for millions of years. There is nothing to erase them. The craters that pockmark its face are the scars of impacts from billions of years ago, preserved because nothing heals them. It is a world where the past does not fade. The moon they saw dying and rising every month was, in itself, the least changing thing imaginable. A still, airless, silent monument, holding every mark ever made on it, turning its one preserved face toward a living, weathering, ever-changing earth. The god of renewal was, in truth, the one thing that never renews at all. It only seemed to die and return. It was always, exactly, changelessly there. And I have to correct one thing here, gently, because you have almost certainly heard it said wrong, and the wrongness matters. People call it the dark side of the moon. It is not dark. There is a famous album and a great deal of poetry riding on that phrase, and it is astronomically false. The far side of the moon gets exactly as much sunlight as the near side. 2 weeks of day and 2 weeks of night every month, just like the side we see. In fact, at the very moment the moon is new to us, when the side facing Earth is fully dark and the moon has vanished from our sky, the far side is in full, brilliant sunlight. It is not the dark side, it is the far side, the side turned away, not the side kept in shadow. The only thing dark about it is our own long ignorance of it. Say far side, the moon hides its face from us, yes, but it hides it in full sunlight. So set the two pictures side by side again, the way we keep doing, because it is the whole method of this night. They watched the moon hide its face and return, month after month, and they made of it a god who dies and rises, who goes down among the dead and climbs back into the sky renewed. And what was actually happening was stranger and quieter than any resurrection. A locked and faithful world, turning in perfect step with its own orbit, showing us one face and one face only, keeping a whole hidden hemisphere turned forever toward the dark of space. A face we would not lay eyes on until we had built machines that could fly around behind it and look back. They thought the moon was hiding in death. It was only, all along, keeping its back to us. And when we finally saw that back, it had been waiting there, unchanged, in the sunlight, the whole time. They were wrong about where the moon went when it vanished, but they were reaching, in their story of descent and return, for something true about the moon that they could never have proven, that it was steadier, more faithful, more locked into its relationship with the earth than it had any right to be. And that faithfulness, that locked and constant presence, turns out to be one of the most important things about it, because the moon does not just keep one face turned toward us, it keeps the whole earth steady. It holds our world in place. Without it, the ground under you, the seasons, the very tilt of the planet, would wander and lurch in ways that might have made everything you are impossible. That is the third thing, and it is the one where the liars are waiting, where you will be told the moon was placed here on purpose, by someone for us. So it is the one where I am going to have to be the most careful of all. This is the door where I have to stop before we even go in and clear something out of the way. Because this is the exact spot where, if you went looking for videos about the moon tonight, you would be lied to, confidently and repeatedly. And the lie is a seductive one. And I would rather hand you the truth, even though it is a little more work. The lie goes like this. You will be told that there is an ancient tablet, Sumerian usually, that says the moon was placed, put there, positioned deliberately, by someone, at some moment, to make the earth work, to switch the planet on, to prepare it for life, or for us. You will be told the moon arrived when the earth's function changed. You will hear words like placed and installed and designed, and you will be told the Sumerians knew this, wrote it down, and that the knowledge has been ignored or hidden. I want to be very plain, because you're half asleep in trusting me, and that is a responsibility. There is no such tablet. The Sumerians did not write that the moon was placed to make the Earth work. That idea is not ancient at all. It is modern. It comes from the 20th century, from a strange and famous hoax in 1970 about the moon being a hollow artificial spaceship, and from a whole genre of much more recent writing that dresses up modern speculation in an ancient costume and sells it as lost Sumerian wisdom. The tablets that these videos wave at do not say what they claim. I have read what the Sumerians actually wrote about the moon, and it is what we have already seen: a god, a boat, a lamp, a counter of months, a father of the sun. Beautiful and real and enough. They did not need to know the moon was placed, because it wasn't, and they didn't claim it was. That part is invention, and I can even tell you where the invention comes from, because it has a history, and knowing the history helps you resist it. In 1970, two Soviet writers named Vasin and Shcherbakov published an article with a title that tells you everything. Is the moon the creation of alien intelligence? In it, they floated the idea that the moon was not a natural body at all, but a gigantic hollow artificial construct, a spaceship parked in orbit around the Earth by some ancient civilization. It was speculation dressed as a question, with no real evidence behind it, and it caught on the way such things do. And then through the 1970s and after, other writers, most famously a man named Zechariah Sitchin, who claimed to translate Sumerian tablets in ways no actual Assyriologist accepted, wove the moon and the Anunnaki and ancient astronauts into a vast story of alien gods engineering the earth and its sky. Sitchin's translations are not real translations. Scholars who actually read Sumerian and Akkadian have shown again and again that the tablets do not say what he claimed. But the story was thrilling, and it sold enormously, and it seeded the whole modern genre. The placed moon, the engineered earth, the hidden knowledge in the tablets. That you are being fed today by 100 channels that have never read a line of cuneiform. So when you hear that a Sumerian tablet says the moon was placed, understand what you're actually hearing. Not the voice of an ancient scribe, but the echo of a 1970 magazine article and a discredited translator in an ancient mask. The mask is very good, but it is a mask. So let me give you the honest ancient anchor instead, the true thing that lives underneath the false one, because there is a real emotional truth here that the liars are clumsily grabbing at. The Sumerians did feel that the moon was the great steadying presence in their world, not because they knew any physics, but because he was the most dependable thing they had. He was the fixed clock. He was the one who made the months and completed the year, and by whom the destinies of the days were determined. In a world of flood and drought and sudden death, the moon was the reliable one, the one who always returned on schedule, the orderer, the one who kept time from falling into chaos. That sense, the moon is the keeper of order, the anchor of the calendar, the steadying rhythm of the whole world, that is genuinely theirs. They did not say he was placed, they said he was steady, and it turns out that the moon really is steadying the world, in a way so specific and so physical that if you took the moon away, the ground beneath you would, over long ages, begin to lurch. Here is the real science, and it is genuinely one of the most important facts about why you are able to exist. The Earth is tilted. Its axis, the line it spins around, is not straight up and down relative to its path around the sun. It leans over by about 23.5 degrees. That tilt is the reason you have seasons. As the Earth goes around the sun, first one hemisphere leans toward the light and has summer, while the other leans away and has winter. And then, half a year later, they swap. The tilt is the engine of the seasons, and crucially, that tilt is stable. It wobbles a little, it drifts slowly between about 22 and 24.5 degrees over tens of thousands of years, but it stays always in that narrow, gentle band. The seasons are reliable across the ages. The climate has somewhere stable to stand, and I should be clear that stable does not mean frozen. The tilt does move, just gently, and even those gentle movements matter enormously. Over tens of thousands of years, the Earth's tilt drifts back and forth across that narrow band, and its orbit slowly changes shape, and the axis slowly wobbles like a spinning top. 3 slow rhythms that a Serbian scientist named Milutin Milankovic worked out early in the 20th century, and which we now know pace the coming and going of the ice ages. When the tilt is a little greater, the summers are a little stronger, and the ice retreats. When it is a little less, the ice can grow. So even the small, safe wobble the moon allows us is powerful enough to grow and melt continental ice sheets over the ages. Now imagine that tilt not drifting gently across 2 degrees, but lurching wildly across dozens, the poles swinging toward the sun and away, the whole climate heaving from one extreme to the opposite over geological time. That is the world we might have without the moon's steadying hand, and we do not have to only imagine it, because we can look next door. Mars has no large moon, only 2 tiny captured asteroids, and calculations suggest that Mars's tilt has in fact wandered chaotically over its history, tipping far over and back, its climate lurching with it, its ice caps migrating. The moon spared us that, not on purpose, but it spared us, and the difference between a wildly tilting world and a gently wobbling one is quite possibly part of the difference between a dead planet and a living one. This has fed one of the genuinely interesting live debates in science, and because it is live, I want to give you both sides honestly, rather than pick the dramatic one. Some scientists have argued that the moon is one of a whole string of lucky features that made Earth able to host complex life. The right-sized planet, the right distance from the sun, a big stabilizing moon, a protective magnetic field, a giant planet like Jupiter shepherding away some of the incoming debris, and that this combination might be rare in the universe, so that complex life could be scarce and Earth-like worlds precious. That is sometimes called the rare Earth idea. Other scientists push back hard, pointing out that we have a sample of exactly one, that we may be overrating how essential each of these features is, that life might be far more adaptable and the galaxy far more fertile than our single lonely example can tell us. And I think the honest position, lying here in the dark, is that we simply do not know yet. We do not know how necessary the moon was. We do not know how common such moons are. We do not know whether the sky's crowded with living worlds or nearly empty. What we do know is narrower and still wonderful, that our moon does steady our world, that a stable tilt did give life a calm and patient stage to unfold on, and that we are, however it came about, the kind of creatures who can work all of this out and lie awake wondering about it. Whether the moon was necessary for us is unknown. That it helped and that we are lucky it is there is true, and that no one arranged it, that it fell into place by accident and we grew up underneath it, that too is true. And I find it does not make the moon less wonderful, it makes it more. A thing that happened by chance and turned out to cradle a world is somehow more moving to me than a thing that was placed, the accident that loved us. That is closer to the truth, and it is the better story anyway. And the moon's steadying hand leaves one more mark on the sky, a slow and majestic one that the ancients half noticed without ever grasping its cause. The Earth's axis, while it holds its tilt steady, does very slowly swivel. It traces a great circle in the sky over about 26,000 years, the way the axis of a spinning top slowly circles as it turns. This is called precession, and it is driven by exactly the pull we have been talking about, the gravity of the moon and the sun, tugging on the Earth's equatorial bulge. And it has a consequence you can see if you live long enough or read old enough records. The pole of the sky, the fixed point the whole heavens seem to turn around, the point our North Star sits almost exactly on the day, was not always marked by that star. Because the axis slowly circles, the title of pole star passes, over the millennia, from one star to another. Today it is Polaris. But in the age of the Sumerians and the builders of the Egyptian pyramids, 5,000 years ago, the pole of the sky was near a different star, a fainter one called Thuban, in the constellation of the Dragon. And the Great Pyramids were aligned to it. The sky the ancients watched had a different centre than ours. Slowly, over thousands of years, the moon and the sun have swung the Earth's axis around and moved the still point of the heavens from one star to the next, and will keep moving it, so that in thousands of years more our descendants will steer by a pole star we would not recognise. Even the fixed point of the sky is not truly fixed. It only turns too slowly for a single life to see, steadied by the moon and stirred by it, both at once. And there is a shadow on the far side of this steadiness, a consequence of everything we have said, that is worth carrying quietly. Because the moon is leaving, we will come to that at the end, but hold it now, and the steadying grip it has on the Earth's tilt depends on the moon being large and close. As the moon slowly recedes, over hundreds of millions and billions of years, its steadying hand will loosen. Far in the future, with the moon much farther away, the Earth's tilt may begin to wander more freely again, the seasons to grow less reliable, the climate to lose the anchor it has leaned on for so long. That is a long way off, so long that the sun's own slow brightening will likely have transformed the Earth before it much matters. And it is nothing to carry as worry into sleep, but it reframes the gift. The moon is not steadying us forever. It is steadying us now in this long, lucky window, while it is still close enough to hold us level. A window that opened in fire 4.5 billion years ago, and is very slowly, over timescales that make a human life look like a single blink of a single night, beginning to close. We live inside the moon's steadiness the way you live inside a warm room on a cold night. Not because it's permanent, but because for now, for this long now, that contains all of human history and all of yours, the warmth is holding, and the door is shut, and there is time to rest. And that long calm the moon brought us was not empty. It was the stage on which everything happened. The slow, gentle rhythm of the ice ages, those tens of thousands of years of ice advancing and retreating, paced by the small wobbles the moon allows, and the sun drives, was the very weather in which our own ancestors evolved. The rise and fall of the great ice sheets shaped the continents our species walked out across, opened and closed the roads between them, made and unmade the coastlines and the grasslands, pressed on us the pressures that grew our adaptable, restless, clever kind. Had the tilt lurched wildly instead of wobbling gently, that whole long, survivable, patient climate might never have existed, and neither might we. So when you lie here tonight, steady on steady ground, under reliable seasons, in a climate calm enough to have a history at all, some part of that calm traces back to the large grey companion that a collision threw into the sky, holding the world level long enough for a creature to arise that could look up and wonder how it got there, not on purpose, but it held us level. And in the level quiet we grew, and the reason it is stable is the moon. In 1993, 3 French scientists, Jacques Lascar, François Joutel, and Philippe Robutel, published a paper in the journal Nature with a title that says it exactly: The Stabilization of the Earth's Obliquity by the Moon. Obliquity is just the technical word for that axial tilt, and what they showed, with careful calculation of how all the gravitational tugs in the solar system add up over millions of years, is that the moon's steady gravitational grip on the Earth is what holds the tilt in its narrow band. The large, close moon acts like a stabilizer, a gyroscope steadying weight, keeping the axis from being pushed around by the subtler, competing pulls of the sun and the other planets. And they showed the alternative, which is the frightening part. Without the moon, if you simply removed it, those competing planetary tugs would no longer be held in check, and the Earth's tilt would become, in their word, chaotic. Not wobbling gently between 22 and 24 degrees, but swinging wildly over millions of years across an enormous range, potentially from nearly zero, straight up to more than 80 degrees, tipped almost completely onto its side. And a world whose tilt lurches like that is a world whose climate lurches with it. Poles that suddenly bake, tropics that suddenly freeze, seasons that transform beyond recognition over geological time, the whole climate system heaving from one extreme to another. It is very hard to imagine the long, patient, stable stretches that complex life needed to evolve, happening on a world tilting like that. The moon quietly, by simply being there, being large, being close, holds the Earth's tilt still. And in holding the tilt still, it holds the seasons steady. And in holding the seasons steady, it makes the calm climate that let life take its time and become complicated and become you. Now stoy, the honesty, because I promised, and because this is exactly where the temptation is to slide from the true thing back into the false one. 2 corrections, and I want you to hold both. The first is that the science itself has been softened a little since 1993, and I would be a hypocrite to debunk the pseudoscience and then oversell the real science. Later researchers, a team led by Jacques Lissoir in 2012, and others after, went back and ran the numbers more carefully for more cases and found that a moonless Earth's tilt might not swing quite as catastrophically as first claimed, at least for certain rates of spin. It might wander within bounds rather than tumbling all the way over. So the honest statement is this: the moon helps keep the Earth's tilt, and therefore its climate, stable over very long timescales. That much is solid. The stronger claim that the moon is absolutely required for complex life, that without it we would be flatly impossible, that is contested and probably overstated. The moon helps. Whether it was strictly necessary, we do not actually know. And the second correction is the one that matters most for the lie we started with. The moon stabilizing the Earth's tilt is a real physical effect. It is not a purpose. It is not a plan. It is not evidence that anyone placed the moon there for us. A collision 4.5 billion years ago threw up a great deal of rock, and that rock became a large, close moon. And a large, close moon happens, as a matter of gravitational fact, to steady the tilt of the planet it orbits. That is cause and effect, not intention. The moon was not placed to make the Earth work. The moon was made in an accident, and one of the countless consequences of that accident happened to be a steadier climate. And we are here, in part, because of that steadiness. But here because of it, not intended by it. The difference between those two things is the entire difference between science and the story someone is trying to sell you. The ancients said the moon was steady, and they were right. Nobody placed it. It fell into place, in fire, by chance and stayed. So that is the moon, holding the world level beneath you. Not on purpose, but really. And it does its steadying from a particular place, hanging in a particular sky. And the Sumerians had very definite ideas about that sky, about what it was made of, and how high it went, and what held it up. They thought the moon was travelling across and under a ceiling, a solid ceiling, a dome. And this is the part that the people selling you lies love the most. The idea that the sky is a solid dome, a firmament, a physical lid over a flat and enclosed world. So this too is a door I have to walk you through carefully, because there is something genuinely real and genuinely ancient here, tangled up with something genuinely false and genuinely modern. And I want you to be able to tell them apart. That is the fourth thing. The ceiling of the world. The Sumerians and the Babylonians and Assyrians who came after them believed the sky was solid. Not empty, not open. A real physical structure over their heads, a ceiling made of stone, holding up the waters above and holding down the air below, with the sun and the moon and the stars set into it or moving beneath it. This is true. This is genuinely what they thought, and we know it in remarkable detail because they wrote it down. And I want to give it to you carefully, because it is one of the most vivid pieces of ancient cosmology that survives. And because, in a moment, I am going to have to separate it very sharply from a modern lie that wears its costume. We know the details from a small number of extraordinary cosmological texts, studied and pieced together by scholars. The great modern authority is a book by Wayne Horowitz called Mesopotamian Cosmic Geography, and the key tablets carry catalogue names like KR 307. And what they describe is a layered universe, not one sky but several, stacked like floors, each made of a different kind of stone. There were 3 heavens, one above another. The lower heaven, the one nearest us, the one where the stars are, was made, they said, of jasper. And on the underside of that floor of jasper, the god had drawn the constellations. Listen to that image. The stars are not distant suns hanging in empty space. The stars are patterns etched onto the stone ceiling of the lowest heaven, drawings on the underside of a floor, so that when you look up at night, you are reading the pictures carved into the rock above you. Above the jasper heaven was the middle heaven, made of a blue stone they called sagalmud, a lapis-coloured stone, and there, on a high dais, sat the great god, Bel Marduk in the Babylonian version. And above that, the upper heaven, the highest, made of a reddish stone called Luludanitu, mottled with white and black, and that was the dwelling of Anu, the oldest sky god, the god of the very top of everything. 3 heavens of stone, stacked with open space between them so that each could be seen from below, and beneath them, correspondingly, 3 earths going down. A universe of stone floors, with us living on the ground floor, looking up through the open air at a painted ceiling of jasper, with the stars drawn on it, and 2 more stone heavens above that, all the way up to the seat of the oldest god, and the structure went down as well as up. Just as there were 3 heavens stacked above, there were, in their picture, earth stacked below, the ground we stand on, and beneath it the realm of the underworld gods, and beneath that the deep, and under everything and around everything was water. This is one of the oldest and most persistent ideas in their whole cosmology, that the world floats on and is surrounded by a cosmic ocean. There were the waters below, the Apsu, the great fresh water deep beneath the earth, from which the springs and rivers rose, the domain of the wise god Enki-Ea. And there were the waters above, held back by the solid sky, the ceiling keeping the upper ocean from crashing down onto the world. That is, in fact, part of what the solid sky was for. It was a barrier holding up the waters of heaven, and the rain was understood as those upper waters let through, sluiced down through gates or windows in the ceiling. It is exactly the picture you find in the opening of Genesis 2, the firmament dividing the waters above from the waters below, because it was the shared inheritance of that whole world. A bubble of air, roofed and floored with stone, with a great ocean above the roof and a great ocean below the floor, and the sun and moon and stars moving through the air beneath the lowest stone heaven, and the gods enthroned in the stone heavens above. It is a complete, coherent, carefully imagined cosmos. It is wrong in nearly every particular, and it is one of the most impressive acts of imagination the human race ever performed, because they built it out of nothing but their eyes and their minds and the sky itself. And their layered sky left a mark on us that you carry in your language without knowing it. When you say someone is in 7th heaven, meaning the height of joy, you are speaking distantly the cosmology of the ancient Near East, the idea of stacked heavens, one above another, the highest being the seat of the divine, the topmost floor, the closest to God. That precise number of 7 heavens comes down through later traditions, but the impulse, heavens stacked in layers, the holiest at the top, is the same one the Mesopotamians carved into their tablets, with their stone floors of jasper and blue and mottled red, and 7 was, for them, a number saturated with cosmic weight. The 7 demons that besiege the moon in the eclipse, the 7 gates of the underworld, the 7 sages who brought the civilization up out of the waters, the 7 winds. Over and over, 7, a number that meant completeness, totality, the full and finished set. Their universe was numbered and ordered and layered, floors above and floors below, sevens everywhere, holding it together. It was wrong as a description of the actual cosmos. There are no floors, no layers, no seven anything up there, only space and its scattered suns going on without end. But as a work of the human imagination, it was magnificent, and it was influential, and its echoes are still in the words you reach for when you're happy. You reach without knowing it for their seventh floor. Let me give you the actual lines close to how the scholars translate them, because they are beautiful. The lower heavens are jasper. They belong to the stars. Upon them he drew the constellations of the gods. The upper heavens are Luludanitu stone. They belong to Anu. That is the real cosmos of the people who invented writing. A solid, stone, layered sky. A ceiling you could in principle touch if you could only climb high enough. And they were not alone in this. The idea of a solid sky, a firmament, was shared across the whole ancient Near East. When the Hebrew Bible, in the very first chapter of Genesis, describes God making a firmament in the midst of the waters to divide the waters from the waters, that word in the Hebrew means a beaten, hammered out expanse, a solid dome of the sky, the same broad idea their neighbours held. I want to be careful and honest here, and not claim the Hebrews simply copied the Babylonians. The exact lines of influence between these cultures are genuinely debated by scholars, and I am not going to pretend that argument is settled. But the shared picture is real. Across the ancient Near East, the sky was widely imagined as a solid vault, a dome, a ceiling over the world. That is a true fact about what ancient people believed. And now I have to do the hard thing, the thing this whole channel is for, because there are people right now, today, who will take that true fact, that ancient peoples believed in a solid dome over the sky, and use it to try to convince you that the dome is real, that the sky actually is a physical firmament, a literal solid barrier over a flat and enclosed earth, and that the ancients knew this, and that modern science is hiding it. And I need to tell you, as gently and as clearly as I can, in the dark, when you're trusting me, that is false. There is no solid dome. The sky is not a stone ceiling. The stars are not drawn on the underside of a floor of jasper. They are suns enormous and unthinkably far, scattered through a space that goes on with no lid on it at all. The air you are breathing does not stop at a barrier. It simply thins and fades away into vacuum, with no wall anywhere. We have flown through the place where the dome was supposed to be. We have gone past it, out into the black, and looked back at the earth hanging in nothing, a ball lit on one side, turning. There is no firmament. The ancient belief was real and sophisticated and completely understandable for people without telescopes or spacecraft. And it was also simply wrong in the way that being early and observant and thoughtful can still be wrong. Holding both of those at once, respecting the belief and not pretending it was secretly correct, is the whole discipline of looking honestly at the past. But here is what moves me about this door, and why I did not want to just knock the false thing down and leave you with nothing. Because underneath the ancient dream of a protective ceiling over the world, there is a real thing. There is, in fact, something invisible arched over you right now that is holding back a danger you cannot see. And it is more wonderful than a dome of stone precisely because it is not solid at all. The earth is wrapped in a shield. Two shields, really. The first is the atmosphere itself, the ocean of air, which burns up the small debris that would otherwise hammer the surface and blocks much of the radiation that would otherwise sterilize it. And the second, higher and stranger, is the magnetosphere, a vast invisible field of magnetism generated deep in the molten iron heart of the spinning earth that reaches far out into space and deflects the solar wind. Because the sun is not only warmth and light, the sun also blows outward a constant stream of charged particles, a wind of radiation that would over time strip away our air and scour the surface. and the Earth's magnetic field catches that wind and turns it aside, funnels it around us and away, so that it breaks over the planet like water around the bow of a ship. This was discovered at the very dawn of the space age. The belts of trapped radiation around the Earth were found by a scientist named James Van Allen using an instrument aboard Explorer 1, the first American satellite, launched in 1958. The magnetic shield is real and measurable, and it is protecting you at this moment. And we know what happens to a world that loses it, because we have watched the corpse of one. Mars. Mars once had a thicker atmosphere, and probably liquid water, and quite possibly a magnetic field like ours. And then, more than 4 billion years ago, the churning core that generated that field shut down, and the shield went dark, and the solar wind, no longer deflected, began to strip Mars of its air, molecule by molecule, over billions of years, until it became the thin, cold, nearly airless desert it is today. NASA has a spacecraft called MAVEN that has actually measured this happening. The atmosphere of Mars still leaking away into space, right now, for want of a shield. That is what the dome really is. Not stone, not solid, not touchable. An invisible field of magnetism, thrown up by the iron core of a living planet, holding back a wind of radiation that would otherwise, patiently, kill the world. The ancients imagined a solid ceiling protecting them from the waters above. The truth is an invisible field protecting us from the fire of the sun. They reached for a dome. The real thing is a force and a field, and it is better than a dome, and it is over you now. And unlike the stone dome, the real shield can be seen, not as a wall, but as a light. Because when the solar wind is strong, when the sun hurls out a great gust of charged particles, the magnetic field funnels some of them down toward the poles, where they crash into the upper air and make it glow. And that glow is the aurora, the northern and southern lights, those vast silent curtains of green and red rippling over the polar skies. When you look at the aurora, you are looking at the shield doing its work, at the solar wind breaking against the magnetic field and being turned aside and lighting up the sky as it goes. The dome made visible, not stone, but light and moving. And on the rare occasions when the sun sends out a truly enormous storm, you can see how real the danger it holds back is. In 1859, there was a solar storm so powerful, we call it the Carrington event, after the astronomer who watched the flare, that the aurora was seen almost to the tropics, and the telegraph systems of the world, the cutting-edge technology of the day, sparked and failed and in some cases caught fire, overwhelmed by the electrical surge. If a storm like that struck today, it could cripple satellites and power grids across the planet. That is the wind the shield turns aside, quietly, every day, the wind that scoured the air off Mars once Mars lost its own protection. The ancients feared the waters above would fall. The real thing held back above you is a wind of fire from the sun, and the thing holding it back is not a ceiling you could touch, but an invisible field thrown up by the molten iron turning at the centre of a living world. And let me stay one more moment with the honest business of the dome, because I know that somewhere out there tonight, someone is being told, earnestly, that the firmament is real, and the earth is flat and enclosed, and that all of this is ancient suppressed truth. So let me just lay the plain facts beside the ancient belief. Gently, once, we have sailed all the way around the earth, in every direction, for 500 years. We have flown around it. We have put thousands of satellites into orbit around it, circling a ball. They could not circle a disc under a dome. There are people living above us right now, tonight on the space station, going around the whole Earth every 90 minutes, watching the sunrise 16 times a day, looking down at a curved and turning globe with no dome over it and no edge to fall off. We have photographs, the whole Earth hanging in black space, a blue marble taken by astronauts on their way to that very moon. The Earth rising over the moon's grey horizon, seen by human eyes from 250,000 miles away. We have stood on the moon and looked back and seen the Earth as a small blue sphere in the dark. There is no dome. There has never been a dome. The ancient Mesopotamians believed in one, and they had every excuse. No ships that had sailed around the world, no satellites, no photographs, nothing but their eyes, and the flat horizon, and the bowl of the sky. They earned their mistake honestly. We have no such excuse, and to claim the dome now, with all of that known, and flown and photographed, is not to honour the ancients. It is to throw away everything we bought with their long patient watching. They dreamed a stone sky because they could not yet see past it. We can see past it. The kindest thing we can do with their dream is to be honest that it was one, and to marvel that from under that imagined ceiling they still managed to chart the real moon so well that the line of their watching leads all the way to the mirrors we left up there. And I will tell you one honest, humbling thing about the real shield, so that we do not leave it sounding like a perfect and permanent wall, because it is neither. The Earth's magnetic field is not fixed. It drifts, it strengthens and weakens, and every so often, every few 100,000 years on average, though very irregularly, it does something astonishing. It reverses. The North Magnetic Pole and the South Magnetic Pole trade places. It has happened hundreds of times in the Earth's history. We can read it frozen into the rocks, in the way iron-bearing minerals locked in the magnetic direction of their moment as they cooled. The last full reversal was around 780,000 years ago, and during a reversal, the field weakens and grows tangled for a time before it settles into its new direction. The shield, briefly, thins. And here is the honest, slightly unsettling present-day fact. The Earth's magnetic field has been measurably weakening over the last couple of centuries, and there is a large, growing region over the South Atlantic where it is especially weak, where satellites already have to be shielded more carefully against radiation. Scientists do not think this means a reversal is imminent. The field has weakened before and recovered, and there is no cause for alarm tonight. But it is a good and honest corrective to the idea of a solid, eternal dome. The real shield is a living, shifting, occasionally flipping thing, generated by the churning of molten iron thousands of miles beneath your feet, and it has its own long weather, its own strong ages and weak ones, far too slow for a human life to feel. The ancients wanted something solid and permanent over their heads. What is actually there is more like a vast, invisible, slowly breathing thing, stronger than any stone and yet never quite still. So the moon travels beneath no stone ceiling. It hangs in open space under no dome, protected along with us by an invisible field. And once a month sometimes, as it travels, something happens to it that terrified the ancient world more than almost anything else. In the sky, the moon turns the colour of blood and darkens, and is, they believed, attacked, devoured, besieged in the vault of heaven by demons. And the way they responded to that terror is one of the strangest and most human stories the ancient world has left us, and it hides inside it the birth of real science. That is the fifth thing. Once in a while, not every month, but often enough that everyone had seen it, the moon did something that broke the pattern and stopped the heart. The full moon, riding high and bright, would begin to darken. Not by clouds. A shadow would creep across its face from one edge, swallowing it, and the moon would turn a deep, dull, coppery red, the colour of dried blood, and hang there in the sky, dimmed and bleeding. Wrong. A lunar eclipse. We know exactly what it is now, and we will get to that, and it is beautiful. But imagine seeing it with no idea what it was. Imagine the lamp of the night, the elder god, the faithful one who always returned on schedule. Imagine watching him choke and darken and turn to blood, out of season, with no warning. It would feel like an attack, and that is precisely what they thought it was. To the Mesopotamians, a lunar eclipse was the moon god under assault, besieged. There were demons in their cosmos, the Utuku, the evil spirits, and above all a group of 7, the seven, the Sabetu, a band of malevolent forces who appear again and again in their incantations as the bringers of disorder and disease. And when the moon darkened, they believed it was these seven who had risen up into the vault of heaven and surrounded Sin, the moon, and were smothering his light, trying to devour him. There is a whole series of incantations about the battle. The evil ones, the seven, in the vault of heaven they besieged the moon. And the great gods Marduk and his father Ea had to intervene, to drive the demons off and rescue the god and restore his light. The eclipse was a crisis in heaven, a god in mortal danger, playing out in front of everyone. And they read the crisis like a text, because to them the sky was a text. The gods wrote their intentions in the movements of the heavens, and a trained scribe could read them. They had compiled, over centuries, an enormous reference work of celestial omens, tablet after tablet, a series scholars call, by its opening words, Enuma, Anu, Enlil. When the gods Anu and Enlil, running to some 70 tablets, laying out what every kind of celestial event portended, and a lunar eclipse was not one omen but many, depending on its details. Which month did it fall in? At which watch of the night, evening, midnight, or dawn? From which direction did the shadow enter the moon's face? And toward which did it move? How long did it last? What colour did the moon turn? Each of these was a variable, and each combination pointed to a different meaning. A good harvest, or a famine, a war won or lost, the death of this king or that one, disaster for this land or that city. The priests who watched the eclipse were not merely afraid. They were working, reading, cross-referencing the darkening moon against the accumulated omen lore of centuries, trying to decode precisely what the gods were announcing. And when the reading came back, pointing at the death of their own king, that is when the machinery of terror truly began to turn. And it was more than a spectacle. It was the single most dangerous omen in their entire system of reading the sky. And it was dangerous, specifically, and above all, for the king, because the moon in the sky stood for the king on the ground. And so a lunar eclipse was read as a direct threat to the life of the ruler, a sign that the king was going to die. The direction the shadow moved, the month it happened in, the watch of the night, every detail was scrutinized, using a vast reference series of celestial omens they had compiled over centuries, a work scholars call Enuma, Anu, Enlil, which laid out what each kind of eclipse foretold. And when the omen was bad, when the sign pointed at the death of the king, they did not simply wait and pray, they had a procedure. And it is one of the most extraordinary things I know of from the ancient world. It was called the substitute king ritual. If an eclipse foretold the king's death, then the logic went, the death was coming, fixed, decreed. The heavens had spoken and the doom was on its way. But perhaps the doom could be redirected, fooled, given a different target. And so, they would take another man, a criminal, a prisoner, sometimes said to be a simpleton, someone expendable, and they would make him king, really king. They would dress him in the royal robes, set the crown on his head, seat him on the throne, give him a woman to be his queen. The bad omen, the death sentence written in the eclipse, was formally transferred onto him. The omens were recited before Shamash, the sun god and judge, and in some accounts physically attached to the substitute's clothing, so that the fate now pointed at him and not at the real king. And the real king, the actual ruler, meanwhile stepped down, went into hiding, was addressed no longer as king, but by a humble title, the farmer, the peasant, and quietly waited. And then after a set time, it could be as long as 100 days, the substitute king and his substitute queen were put to death, killed. Because the fate had to be fulfilled, a king had been marked for death by the heavens, and so a king died, and the omen was satisfied, its terrible energy spent on the stand-in, and they were buried, this doomed pair, with full royal honours, mourned, given the funeral of a king and queen. because in their brief and fatal reign, they had been exactly that. And the real king was purified, and came out of hiding, and took back his throne, alive, the death paid by someone else. This actually happened. It is not a legend. We have the letters, the correspondence of the scholars and priests who managed these rituals for the Assyrian kings, especially for a king named Esarhaddon in the 7th century, before the Common Era, who went through this procedure more than once. Real men were crowned and married and killed to absorb the meaning of a shadow crossing the moon. We know the details of how it worked because, astonishingly, the paperwork survives. From the reign of the Assyrian king Esarhaddon in the 7th century before the Common Era, we have the actual letters, the correspondence between the king and the learned men, the scholars and astrologers and exorcists who advised him on exactly these matters. And in those letters, you can watch the ritual being managed in real time, in careful, bureaucratic, almost tender detail. The scholars write to reassure the hidden king that the substitute is properly installed, that the rites are being observed, that the danger is being absorbed as it should be. They refer to the real king during his concealment by that humble covering name, the farmer, so as not to let the fate find him by his true title. They discuss how long the substitute must reign before the omen is spent. They report when the substitute has, in their careful phrasing, gone to his fate. There is a chilling gentleness to it. Grown, learned men, some of the most educated people alive in their world, soberly arranging the enthronement, marriage, and killing of a stand-in human being to satisfy a shadow, and writing polite letters about it, and it worked in the only sense that mattered to them. The kings it was performed for did not die on schedule. The omen was answered. A king had been marked for death and a king had died, and the real one walked back out of hiding into the sunlight and took up his throne again, purified, spared, alive. The logic is monstrous, and it is also, from inside their world, perfectly, terribly coherent. Sit with the weight of that for a moment, because it tells you how seriously they took the sky. They would kill a man, several men over the years, rather than let a lunar eclipse go unanswered. That is how real the danger in the darkening moon was to them. That is how much power they believed the sky held over the life of a king and the fate of a kingdom. And now here is the turn, and it is the reason this is my favourite door of all 7, because it holds the most beautiful and honest thing in the whole night. Those same people, the priests who feared the 7 demons, who crowned and killed the substitute kings, who read the death of the king in the colour of the shadow. Those same people were, at the very same time, in the very same temples, quietly inventing something that would eventually make all of it obsolete. They were learning to predict the eclipses, because if you watch the sky as carefully as they did, for as long as they did, and they kept records, systematic, dated, night-by-night records of the moon and the planets, and every eclipse for centuries, a continuous program of observation longer than any other in the ancient world, you begin to notice that the eclipses are not random. They come in a rhythm. There is a cycle, a long one, that the Babylonians discovered, which we now call by a name borrowed from their world, the Saros, a period of about 18 years and 11 days, after which the sun and moon return to almost exactly the same alignment, and the eclipses repeat. Once you know the Saros, you can look at the eclipses of the past and calculate the eclipses of the future. You can say, before it happens, that the moon will darken on such a night. And the Babylonians learned to do this. They built tables. They compiled their observations in works like the one called Mul.apin, and in the great running record scholars call the astronomical diaries. And out of all that patient watching, they extracted the hidden clockwork of the heavens and began to predict the very events that had once sent them running to crown a doomed man. Let me give you a sense of the sheer scale of the watching because it is staggering and almost nobody knows about it. Those astronomical diaries are one of the longest continuous scientific records ever kept by any civilization. Night after night, for something like 6 or 7 centuries, from around the middle of the 7th century before the Common Era, down almost to the time of the Roman Empire, Babylonian scribes recorded what happened in the sky. The position of the moon each night against the stars, the movements of the planets, every eclipse, the weather, and not only the sky, they recorded on the same tablets the level of the Euphrates River and the prices in the marketplace, how much barley or wool or dates a shekel of silver would buy that month. They were looking, it seems, for the connections between the heavens and events on earth, but what they actually built, without fully knowing it, was the raw data of a real science, centuries of precise, dated, systematic observation, the longest observing run in the ancient world, out of which the hidden regularities of the moon and planets could finally be extracted. And they had organized the sky to receive it in the compendium called Mulapin. From around 3,000 years ago, they had catalogued the stars and constellations, sorted them into 3 great bands or paths across the sky, named for 3 gods, Enlil and Anu and Ea, and worked out the risings and settings and the rules for keeping the calendar. This was the foundation, and on it they built prediction, and the Greeks later inherited it. Greek astronomers knew of and drew on Babylonian records and methods, and the whole river of Western astronomy runs back in part to those scribes on the Euphrates writing down the moon every night for 700 years. There is a famous story that shows the power of this passing knowing, like a spark jumping a gap. The Greek thinker Thales of Miletus is said to have predicted a solar eclipse, the sun this time, not the moon, that fell, we can calculate, in the year 585 before the Common Era. And the story goes that the eclipse came in the middle of a battle between 2 peoples who had been at war for years, and that when the day suddenly turned to night over the battlefield, both armies were so awestruck and terrified that they stopped fighting, laid down their arms, and made peace. An eclipse that ended a war. And whether or not Thales truly predicted that exact one, historians argue about it. The deeper point stands. The Greeks were able to begin predicting eclipses at all because they had the Babylonian records and cycles to build on. The knowledge that the Babylonian priests had wrung out of 7 centuries of watching flowed westward and became the seed of Greek astronomy. And later still, that same lineage produced things like the Antikythera mechanism, an astonishing bronze-geared device from around 2,000 years ago, found in a shipwreck off a Greek island, that could model the motions of the sun and moon and predict eclipses with turning gears, using cycles the Babylonians had discovered. A little brass computer for the heavens, built on Mesopotamian foundations, from the terror of the demons devouring sin to a clockwork that could tell you the day the shadow would come. That is the distance human beings crossed, and they crossed it by watching and writing it down and refusing to stop. And that deep blood red the moon turns during an eclipse, the colour that made them think of wounds and death and the god bleeding in the sky, has an explanation so lovely that it almost redeems all the fear it once caused. In a lunar eclipse, the earth passes directly between the sun and the moon, and the earth's shadow falls across the moon. But the shadow is not total black because the earth has something the airless moon does not, an atmosphere. And as sunlight grazes past the edges of the earth, our atmosphere bends it, refracts it, and filters it, scattering away the blue light and letting the red light through and curving it inward into the shadow, so that a dim red glow reaches the moon even in the heart of the eclipse. And that red light carries a specific and astonishing origin. It is the light of every sunrise and every sunset happening on earth at that moment, all at once, bent around the curve of the world and cast onto the moon. When the eclipsed moon turns that deep coppery red, you are seeing, projected onto its face, the combined light of all the dawns and all the dusks ringing the entire earth in that hour. Every red sky everywhere gathered up by the atmosphere and thrown across space onto the moon. The Babylonians saw a god bleeding, besieged, dying. What is actually painting the moon red is the light of the whole world's sunrises and sunsets, bent around the planet and falling softly on its oldest companion. They could not have known, but even their terror was, it turns out, lit by something gentle. And I want to say one honest thing about how their fear and their science lived in the same people, because it is easy to get wrong in a way that flatters us and misleads you. We tend to imagine a clean line. First there was superstition, ignorant and fearful, and then one day science arrived and swept it away. That is not how it happened. The men who predicted the eclipses were the very same men who read them as omens. The scholars in the Assyrian and Babylonian courts were astrologers. Their whole reason for watching the sky so obsessively, for keeping those centuries of records, was to read the will of the gods and warn the king. The prediction and the divination were not enemies, they were the same enterprise. It was because they believed the sky foretold the fate of the kingdom that they watched it closely enough and long enough and recorded it carefully enough to begin to find its hidden regularities. The astronomy grew up inside the astrology, like a seed inside its fruit. The desire to read the future in the heavens is what produced the data from which a real science of the heavens could eventually be grown. So I will not sneer at their omens, because their omens are the reason they watched, and their watching is the reason we can predict an eclipse to the minute today. The fear did not block the knowledge. The fear, strangely, funded it. And slowly over centuries, the knowledge grew up and outgrew the fear. But it grew from that root, and we should be honest that it did, and even a little grateful. This is one of the true births of science. Not a metaphor, not an exaggeration. This systematic, mathematical, predictive astronomy, worked out on clay tablets in Mesopotamia across the first millennium before the Common Era, is one of the roots of the whole scientific project. The thing the Greeks would inherit and build on and pass down the line that leads eventually to the spacecraft that photographed the far side of the moon. The people who thought the eclipse was a demon attack were the same people who first learned to see it coming, and I do not think those two facts cancel each other out. I think, held together, they are one of the most moving things human beings have ever done. They were terrified of the darkening moon, and they stared at it, and recorded it, and thought about it for so long and so honestly that they began to tame it, not by magic, not by killing substitute kings, but by understanding, by finding the real rhythm underneath the terror and predicting it. The demons were never there, but the fear was real, and out of the fear, watched long enough and honestly enough, came knowledge. That is the whole story of us, really, compressed into one darkening moon. And think about how completely the meaning of the thing has flipped. For the Babylonians, a lunar eclipse was among the most frightening things the sky could do. An omen of the king's death, a god under attack, a night that might end with a man crowned and killed to turn the doom aside. It was dread. It was emergency. Today, when the papers announce a coming eclipse, people do the opposite of hiding. They travel. They drive for hours. They cross oceans. They gather on hillsides and rooftops with their families and their cameras and their children. And they wait. And when the shadow slides across the moon, and it turns that deep, quiet copper red, they do not tremble. They gasp and point and smile and feel for a moment small and lucky under the sky. The exact same event, the same geometry, the same shadow, the same blood-coloured moon that made an ancient king go into hiding, now draws people out of their houses in wonder. Nothing changed about the moon. Everything changed about us. We learned what it was, and in learning what it was, we turned our oldest terror into one of our purest delights. That is what understanding does at its best. It does not drain the wonder out of a thing. It takes the fear out and leaves the wonder standing, cleaner than before. The shadow still crosses the moon. We just walk toward it now instead of away. And in all that watching, all that patient measuring of the moon's motion night after night, they were doing something else, something more fundamental than reading omens. They were keeping time. The moon was their clock, the original clock, the first clock, the one hanging in the sky. And the story of the moon as the measure of time leads to two last facts about it that they could never have known. One about the pull it has on the sea, and one quiet and astonishing about the fact that the clock is running down. The moon is leaving. That is the sixth thing. Before he was anything else, before the god, before the boat, before the father of the sun, the moon was a clock. That is, in a way, the most basic thing he was to them, and the most useful. Nana makes the months. That was his great office. The very word for month, in their language and in ours and in most of the languages of the earth, is bound up with the moon. The moon and the month are the same root, the same idea, because for almost all of human history, the month simply was the moon. The time from one new crescent to the next, that faithful cycle of about 30 days, counted off against the sky, and they built their entire calendar on him. The month began, officially, with the first sighting of the thin new crescent. Low in the west, watchers were posted, and when the sliver was spotted, the new month was declared. 12 of those lunar months made their year. But here is a problem the moon handed them, and the elegant way they solved it, because it shows you again how good they were. 12 lunar months do not quite add up to a solar year. They fall short by about 11 days. So if you run a purely lunar calendar, it drifts. Your months slide backward through the seasons, until your harvest festival is landing in winter, and nothing lines up with the farming year at all. The Mesopotamians noticed this, of course they did, and they fixed it. Every so often, when the drift had built up enough, they inserted an extra month, a 13th month, an intercalary month, to shove the lunar calendar back into step with the sun and the seasons. And they worked out schemes for when to do it, rules preserved on those same astronomical tablets. They were, in other words, doing real, careful calendar science, reconciling the moon's clock with the sun's, keeping time honest across the years. The moon measured the months, and the priests measured the moon, and between them they held the whole year together. And they found in the process a beautiful piece of hidden arithmetic that we still use, quietly, today. The problem again was fitting the moon's months to the sun's year. 12 moons falling short. Needing that extra month slipped in every so often. But how often exactly? If you watch long enough, you find the answer, and it is almost magical in its neatness. 19 years. In 19 solar years, there are almost exactly 235 lunar months. So if you add 7 extra months across each 19-year cycle, the moon and the sun come back into step, and the whole calendar clicks shut like a lock. The Babylonians worked this out and were using it as a regular rule by around the 5th century before the Common Era. We call it the Metonic cycle now, after a Greek named Meton, who described it a little later. But the Babylonians had it. It is still used to calculate the date of Easter, and it still governs the Hebrew calendar, which to this day slips in its extra month 7 times in 19 years, exactly as the Babylonian astronomers worked out 2,500 years ago, watching the moon. And some scholars think the 7-day week itself owes something to the moon, a quarter of the roughly 28-day cycle, the span from one phase to the next, new to half, to full to half again, each about 7 days. The week, the month, the very shape of how you divide your time, still carries the moon's fingerprints, worn down and half forgotten, but there. And then, in the last century or so, we did something no previous age had ever done. We stopped keeping the moon's time. For all of human history until almost yesterday, time came from the sky, the day from the sun, the month from the moon, the year from both. Time was something you read off the heavens. But we have built clocks now that do not need the sky at all. Atomic clocks which keep time by counting the unimaginably fast, unimaginably steady vibrations of atoms, so precise they would not gain or lose a second in hundreds of millions of years. And the world now runs on those, not on the moon, not even really on the sun. Our seconds are defined by atoms in a laboratory. And here is the quietly poignant part. The Earth's own turning is now slightly too slow and too irregular to keep up with our atomic clocks, because as we have seen, the moon is stealing the Earth's spin and stretching the day. So every so often, the timekeepers of the world have to make a decision about whether to add a leap second to reconcile the perfect atomic time with the slightly slowing turn of the real planet. Think about what that means. We have built a clock so good that we can measure the moon dragging on the length of our day, and we have to patch our calendar to account for it. The moon that gave us the month, that was our first and only clock for 100,000 years, has been quietly retired, and its last remaining influence on official time is that it slows the Earth just enough that our new, better clocks have to pause now and then and wait for the old world to catch up. But before we retired it, the moon did not only measure time, it lit the world and it organised the working of it in ways we have almost entirely forgotten now that a switch on the wall gives us daylight at midnight. For a farmer, before electricity, the full moon was not a symbol, it was a tool. There is a reason one full moon of the year is still called the harvest moon, the full moon nearest the autumn equinox, which for a few nights rises soon after sunset, flooding the fields with enough light to keep working after dark, to bring in the crop in the cool of the evening, to race the coming frost by moonlight. The moon gave the harvest extra hours. Travellers timed their journeys to it, setting out on the nights around the full moon when the roads would be lit and safer. Markets and festivals and religious observances were fixed to its phases. Whole rhythms of ordinary human life, when to plant, when to travel, when to gather, when to feast, turned on the moon's light and the moon's calendar. It was not a distant god only, it was the nightlight of the entire species for the whole of our history, the thing that decided whether the dark was navigable or total. We have flooded that all away now, with our electric glow, and most of us could not tell you tonight what phase the moon is in, a thing every one of our ancestors knew without thinking, the way you know whether it is raining. We have not needed the moon's light for a century or two, but our bodies had it for 1,000,000 years, which is exactly why, when we come to the very last thing, the question of whether some rhythm in us still quietly keeps its time will turn out to be so hard to put to rest. So the moon was the ruler of time. And there is a real physical thing the moon rules too that they had less reason to notice, the tides. The moon's gravity, reaching across space, pulls on the Earth's oceans, and because that pull is slightly stronger on the near side of the Earth than the far side, it stretches the water into two bulges, and as the Earth rotates beneath them, we pass through those bulges as the rise and fall of the tide. Isaac Newton was the one who finally explained it properly in the 1680s with his theory of gravity. The tides are gravity made visible, the moon's grip on the sea written twice a day on every shore. But I have to be honest and tell you that the Sumerians, unlike some seafaring peoples, did not build much of a law around the tides, and the reason is simply geography. They lived at the head of the Persian Gulf, in a shallow, marshy, gentle-tided corner of the world, where the rise and fall of the sea was mild and undramatic. The great obvious power of the moon over the ocean, the thing that a people on an Atlantic coast could hardly miss, was muted where they lived. Their moon ruled the calendar and the omens, not the sea. So I will not hand you a Sumerian tide myth, because there really isn't a great one. The tides are the moon's truly, but they are Newton's discovery, not Nana's. And there is a lovely subtlety in the tides worth a moment, because it shows the moon and the sun working together and against each other, the father and his child pulling on the same sea. The sun raises tides too, It is far larger than the moon, but so much farther away that its tidal effect is only about half the moon's. So most of the time, the moon runs the tides. But twice a month, at new moon and at full moon, the sun and the moon line up, and their pulls add together, and the tides swing to their greatest. The high tides higher, the low tides lower, what we call spring tides, though they have nothing to do with the season. They spring up, and in between, at the half moons, the sun and moon pull at right angles, working against each other, and the tides are gentlest, the neap tides. So the rhythm of the sea, on every coast on earth, is a duet between the moon and the sun, the great boat and the small boat of heaven, pulling on the water in a pattern that repeats with the phases, the moon leading, the sun answering, the tides rising and falling in a music neither one makes alone. The Sumerians on their quiet gulf could not hear that music well, but it is playing twice a day on every shore, keyed to the very phases they built their calendar on. And now the last fact, and it is the quiet, astonishing one, the one that reframes the whole faithful, dependable, eternal-seeming moon of theirs into something a little heartbreaking. The moon is leaving. It is drifting away from the earth, slowly, very slowly, but measurably, provably, right now. The moon is receding from us, spiralling gradually outward, getting a little farther away every year. The rate is about 3.8 centimeters a year, roughly the speed your fingernails grow. That is how fast the moon is retreating, 1.5 inches a year, give or take, carried outward by the same tidal interaction that long ago locked its face toward us. And we know this with beautiful precision, and I love how we know it, because it ties the ancient moon and the modern moon together in a single physical thread. When the Apollo astronauts walked on the moon, they left behind, among other things, special mirrors, retroreflectors, arrays of little corner mirrors designed to bounce a beam of light straight back the way it came. Apollo 11 left one, and Apollo 14, and Apollo 15. And ever since, for more than 50 years, observatories on Earth have been firing lasers at those mirrors and timing, to the billionth of a second, how long the light takes to go up to the moon and bounce back. And from the travel time, you get the distance to within a few centimeters. And year after year, decade after decade, the distance has been slowly, steadily growing. We are watching the moon leave, one laser pulse at a time. And the mechanism of the leaving ties back, beautifully, to the very first things we said about the moon. It is the tides that are pushing it away. The moon raises those two bulges of water on the Earth, but the Earth spins faster than the moon orbits. So the Earth's rotation drags those bulges slightly ahead, out in front of the moon, and the bulge, being a little bit of extra mass running ahead of the moon, tugs the moon forward, gives it a tiny endless forward pull, and a forward pull on an orbiting body lifts it into a higher, wider orbit. So the tides, month by month, are handing the moon a little energy and nudging it outward. And by the strict law of conservation of angular momentum, that energy has to come from somewhere, and it comes from the Earth's spin, which is why, as the moon climbs away, the Earth's rotation slows and the day grows longer. The two are locked in a single slow exchange. The moon buys its retreat with the Earth spinning, and the Earth pays for the moon's leaving with the length of its days. Reach far enough into the future, and in theory, the process would end only when the Earth's day had lengthened to match the moon's month, and the two turned in perfect mutual lock, each keeping one face to the other forever. Except that will take tens of billions of years, far longer than the sun itself has left to burn. So the sun will swell and die and swallow this whole quiet arrangement long before the moon finishes leaving. But for now, tonight, and for as long as anything you will ever know, the exchange goes on. The moon lifting away at the speed of growing fingernails, the day stretching by its milliseconds, the oldest relationship this planet has slowly, gently, imperceptibly loosening, and the leaving will, one far day, take away one of the most beautiful sights the sky has ever offered. And this is a fact almost no one knows, and it undoes me a little every time. You know that a total solar eclipse is possible only because of an astonishing coincidence. The moon and the sun appear almost exactly the same size in our sky. The sun is about 400 times wider than the moon, but it is also about 400 times farther away, and those two 400s nearly cancel, so that the little moon can slide in front of the great sun and cover it precisely, blotting out the blazing disk and revealing the ghostly corona around it. It is one of the great strokes of luck in the whole sky, and it is a coincidence of this exact moment in history, because the moon is leaving, and as it draws farther away, it appears a little smaller, year by year, age by age, and there will come a time hundreds of millions of years from now when the moon has receded so far that it can no longer quite cover the sun at all, and the last total solar eclipse will happen, and after that there will never be another one, on this planet, forever. We are living inside the window, a window of a few 100 million years, out of the billions the Earth has and will have, when the moon is at just the right distance to fit over the sun. The Sumerians lived in that window, you live in it, and it is closing unbelievably slowly as the moon drifts away. There will be a last eclipse. No one will know it is the last one when it happens. And then the moon will go on receding, smaller and smaller, in a sky that has forgotten it was ever a god, or a clock, or close enough to swallow the sun. And there is one more thing the tides may have done, quietly, over unimaginable time, that is worth carrying into sleep, because it may reach all the way down to why you're here to fall asleep at all. Think about what the tides make on a shoreline. The intertidal zone, that strip of the world that is underwater at high tide and bare to the air at low tide, twice a day, forever. It is one of the most demanding places to live on Earth. You must survive being submerged and then exposed, wet and then dry, over and over. And some scientists have wondered whether that relentless rhythm, that twice daily rehearsal of leaving the water and returning to it, might have been one of the pressures that, across hundreds of millions of years, helped coax life out of the sea and onto the land. A tide pool, stranded at low tide, is a small harsh training ground. A creature that can endure a few hours out of the water has a foothold on a whole empty continent. It is not proven. It is one idea among several about how life made the great crossing from ocean to shore, and I will not oversell it. But it is a real and serious possibility, and if it is right, then the moon, through the tides it raises, may have helped write the very first chapters of life on land. Maybe somewhere far back in the story that leads to lungs, to legs, to us. The same moon that steadied the climate and lit the nights may also, through the patient hammering of the tides on the shore, have helped teach life to leave the sea. We do not know for certain. But it is possible that you breathe air in part because the moon pulls the water twice a day. The father of the sun, the lamp of the night, and just maybe, far back, one of the midwives of everything that walks. And there is a consequence of the moon leaving that reaches all the way down into the length of your own day, because the moon and the earth are locked in a slow exchange. As the moon drifts outward, the earth's rotation gradually slows. The days are getting longer, not by much, a couple of milliseconds per century, but relentlessly across the ages. And you can read the record of it in ancient life, in the growth bands of fossil corals, which lay down daily and yearly layers like tree rings. Count the daily bands in a year's growth of a coral that lived hundreds of millions of years ago, and you find more of them than a year holds now, because back then the day was shorter and the year held more of them. Around 380 million years ago, when those corals were alive, a day on Earth was only about 22 hours long, and the year held closer to 400 days. The moon was closer then, and the days were shorter, and slowly, ever since, the moon has been drawing away, and the days have been stretching out. And both are still happening, tonight, imperceptibly, as you lie here. So the moon, they thought, was the most faithful thing in the world, the one who always returned, the eternal, dependable lamp. The moon is, in the deepest sense, not eternal at all. It is going. It came in fire, it locked its face to us, it steadied our world and lit our nights and ruled our months, and it is, all the while, drifting quietly away, taking a sliver of every day with it as it goes. In 1 billion years and more, it will hang smaller in the sky. The lamp of the night is being slowly turned down and carried off, and there is nothing to be done about it, and it will outlast every one of us and our whole species regardless. But it is leaving. The most constant companion the earth has ever had is gently saying goodbye over a time scale so vast that to us it looks exactly like staying. They did not know that. How could they? They thought he was forever. But I think if you had told them, if you could have stood beside one of those watchers of waiting for the new crescent, and told him that the god was drifting away, I think he would have understood the feeling of it, even without the physics. Because that is what the faithful things do in the end. They stay and stay and stay so steadily that you stop imagining they could ever go. And then, on a scale too slow to see, they go. And there is one more thing the moon does, and it is the last of them, and it is the only one that is not about the earth, or the sky, or the sea, or time. It is about you, about your body lying here and your sleep tonight. And it is the one place where I have to be the most careful of all, because it is the exact place where the oldest and silliest lies about the moon still live, and where, underneath them, buried and small and honest, there might just be something real. That is the last thing, the one that is happening to you right now. We have followed the moon all the way out, to its violent birth, its hidden face, its steadying grip on the world, the stone sky they thought it hung beneath, the demons they thought devoured it, the slow drift that is carrying it away. 6 things the moon does to the earth, each one opening in an old belief and closing in a real fact. And now, the last one. And it is different from all the others, because it does not point up at the sky. It points down, here, at you, at your body, lying in the dark, trying to sleep. And I have to walk into it very carefully, because this is the door where the lies are oldest and most stubborn, and I would rather clear them out first and hand you only what is actually true, even if what is actually true is smaller and quieter than what you have been told. So let me clear away the false things first, because there are 2 big ones, and you have almost certainly absorbed at least one of them. The first is the belief that the full moon makes people mad, that it drives up crime and violence and psychiatric emergencies and admissions to hospitals and even births, that something about the full moon reaches into human behaviour and stirs it into chaos. It is an old belief. The word lunatic itself comes from luna, the moon, from exactly this idea, that the moon could touch the mind and unsettle it. Nurses believe it. Police officers believe it. A great many people are quite sure they have seen it. And it is false. It has been studied carefully and repeatedly, and it does not hold up. In 1985, 2 researchers named Rotten and Kelly gathered together dozens of studies on the supposed lunar effect on behaviour, a meta-analysis, a study of studies, and found no reliable connection at all. No lunar link to psychiatric admissions, to homicides, to crime, to crisis calls, to births. The full moon does not make people mad. The reason so many people are sure it does is a trick of memory. On a busy, strange night, someone glances up, sees the full moon, and files the connection away. And on all the other busy, strange nights when the moon is not full, no one looks up, and no connection gets filed. We remember the hits and forget the misses, and out of that lopsided memory, a myth is built. The full moon is innocent. Whatever chaos you have lived through happened just as often under a crescent and a dark sky. That one is simply not true. And it is worth understanding why this particular myth is so stubborn. Why people who work with the public, nurses, police officers, teachers, emergency room staff, will tell you with total sincerity that the full moon brings chaos, no matter how many studies say otherwise. Part of it is the word itself. Lunatic, lunar, the moon. 3,000 years of language quietly insisting on the connection so that the idea feels ancient and obvious. But most of it is that trick of memory, the psychologists call confirmation bias, and it runs almost automatically. You have a wild, exhausting shift. Afterwards, someone says, "Must be a full moon." You glance out, and if it happens to be full, the phrase lands, the pattern clicks, and the night gets filed in your memory under full moon madness. But on all the other wild, exhausting nights, when the moon is a crescent or dark or nowhere, nobody says the phrase, nobody looks up, and the night gets filed under just a bad night. No lunar label attached. Over a career, you accumulate a whole drawer of full moon madness nights, and no drawer at all for the equally chaotic nights under other moons. And out of that lopsided filing comes an unshakable, sincere, and completely false certainty. It is not that these people are foolish, it is that the human mind is a pattern-finding machine that keeps score badly, remembering the coincidences and discarding the misses. The moon does not madden anyone, but the way we remember is exactly built to make it look like it does. The same goes for the other old claims, and it is worth naming them so you can let them go too. That more babies are born on the full moon, studied carefully, across millions of births and false. The birth rate does not track the moon. That the full moon fills the emergency rooms and the police lines, studied and false, and the oldest and wildest of them, the werewolf, the man who turns to a beast under the full moon. Pure folklore, a story humans have told in 100 forms, because the full moon is bright and strange, and stirs the imagination, not because anything in a human body changes when the moon is round. All of these grew from the same root. The moon is the most dramatic thing in the night sky, impossible not to notice, and so for all of human history, it has been the natural thing to blame, the obvious suspect standing over every strange night. But being the obvious suspect is not the same as being guilty. And when we finally learn to actually count, to gather the births and the crimes and the crises, and line them up honestly against the phases, the moon turned out to have an alibi every time. It is innocent of all of it. The madness, the births, the blood, the beast, none of it is the moon's doing. Which makes the one small thing that will not quite go away, the faint touch on sleep, all the more interesting, precisely because it is the lone survivor, the one claim about the moon, and the body that honest counting has not been able to kill. There is one more of these body and moon beliefs I should touch gently, because it is deeply felt and often asked about, and it deserves an honest answer rather than a dismissal or an overclaim. It is the idea that the moon governs the monthly cycle of a woman's body. The sense that because a menstrual cycle is roughly the length of a lunar month, the two must be connected, that women's bodies keep time with the moon. And here the honest answer is careful and two-sided. The resemblance in length is real and striking. The average cycle and the lunar month are both roughly 29 or 30 days. And it is easy to see why people across history felt they must be linked. But when scientists have actually looked, tracking large numbers of cycles against the phases of the moon, they have not found that the two lock together the way the belief supposes. Cycles begin at all phases of the moon, drift independently, and the rough match in length appears to be a coincidence, rather than the moon pulling the body's clock. There is some newer, limited, and genuinely unsettled research hinting that for some individuals there might be a faint, occasional, loose synchrony that weakens in our brightly lit modern world, which, if it holds up, would be interesting for the same reason the sleep signal is interesting, an old light faintly touching an old rhythm. But it is not established, and I will not tell you it is. The honest shape of it is, the length is a coincidence, the strong version of the belief is not supported, and there is a small, uncertain question at the edges, exactly as there is with sleep. The moon does not run the body, but whether it faintly brushes against a rhythm or two in the dark, under all our new light, that science is still quietly asking, And I find I love that it is still asking, because there is a particular kind of honesty in an open question that a tidy answer can never give you. And it is the note I most want to leave you on, drifting here at the end of a long night about the oldest light in the sky. The confident people, the ones who tell you the moon controls your moods and your blood and your sleep, and the ones who tell you flatly that the moon does nothing to you at all, that it is only rock and reflected light and coincidence. Both of them are claiming to know more than we actually know. The truth, the real and humble and slightly wondrous truth, sits in between. In the small uncertain space the honest scientists are still standing in. The moon does not madden you, and it does not pull your blood, and nearly every dramatic thing you have been told about its power over the body is false. And yet there remains this one faint, stubborn, unkillable maybe, this small signal in the sleep of people who cannot even see it, that will not quite resolve. It may be the last true thing the moon has to tell us about ourselves. Or it may be nothing, a ghost in the data, gone by the next study. And I would rather hand you that honest, open, unfinished maybe than a satisfying lie in either direction, because the maybe is where the real edge of human knowledge actually is tonight. And there is something fitting, something almost tender in ending at the edge, in the dark, with the moon keeping just one small secret still. And the second false thing is subtler, and it sounds almost scientific, which is what makes it stick. You'll be told that the moon pulls on the water in your body. The reasoning goes, the moon raises the tides in the ocean by its gravity, and your body is more than half water. So surely the moon must pull on you too, tugging your fluids, moving something in you, especially when it is full. It sounds reasonable. It is false, and the reason it is false is worth understanding, because it is the same physics that makes the real tides, just followed honestly to its end. Tides are not caused by the moon's raw gravity, they are caused by the difference in the moon's pull across the width of a body, stronger on the near side, weaker on the far side, and that difference is what stretches the oceans. But that difference depends on how big the body is. Across the whole Earth, thousands of kilometers wide, the difference is enough to move oceans. Across a human body, less than 2 meters wide, the difference is almost nothing. The moon's tidal pull on you, from head to toe, is something like a 10 trillionth of the Earth's gravity. It is unimaginably tiny. The wall of the room you're in right now pulls on you gravitationally, harder than the moon's tidal force does. The person lying next to you pulls on you harder. Being made of water changes nothing. A glass of water on your nightstand has no tide in it, and neither do you. The moon does not stir your blood. It cannot. The numbers are not close, and yet here is where I have to be honest in the other direction, because honesty cuts both ways, and the truth is more interesting than a flat no. It is genuinely true that the moon governs the lives of some living things, not by pulling their water, by its light and its rhythm. Out on the coral reefs, once a year, on cue, in the nights after a particular full moon, whole reefs spawn at once. Millions of corals releasing their eggs and sperm into the water in the same few hours. A vast synchronized bloom of life, timed to the phase of the moon, first properly documented on Australia's Great Barrier Reef in the 1980s. There are marine worms that swarm to the surface to breed on specific moons. There are creatures on the shoreline whose whole biology runs on a circa-lunar clock, an internal rhythm tuned not to the day but to the lunar month ticking away inside them, keyed to the light of the moon. So lunar rhythms in living things are not a fantasy. They are real and studied, and in some animals rock solid. The moon really does reach into life on this planet, not through the tides of the body, which are nothing, but through the ancient, reliable rhythm of its light, which living things have been evolving alongside for as long as there has been life on any shore. And that is exactly what makes the last question, the one about you and your sleep, not silly at all, but genuinely open, Because if a coral can keep the moon's time, the honest scientist has to ask, might a human, faintly, somewhere far under the noise, keep a little of it too? So, the moon does not madden you, and it does not pull the water in your body. Those are the two big lies, and they are cleared away. And if that were the whole story, I would tell you so, and we would go quietly to sleep. But it is not quite the whole story, because underneath those loud, false claims, there is a small, quiet, honest question that scientists have actually been asking, and the answer is genuinely uncertain in the most interesting way. And it is, of all things, about sleep. Your sleep, which is why, on a channel about falling asleep, I could not resist saving it for last. The question is simple: does the phase of the moon affect how human beings sleep? And the honest answer is maybe, a little, some of the time, and nobody is quite sure why. In 2013, a group of Swiss researchers, led by a scientist named Christian Kayochin, published a paper in the journal Current Biology with a careful, almost reluctant title, Evidence that the Lunar Cycle Influences Human Sleep. What made their study interesting is that it was not people out under the moon, susceptible to seeing it and expecting things. It was the opposite. They went back to data from an old sleep laboratory experiment. 33 volunteers who had slept years earlier in a controlled lab, in sealed rooms, with no windows, no view of the moon, no clocks, no way of even knowing what phase the moon was in. Nobody, at the time, had been thinking about the moon at all. And when Kayochin's team went back and lined up that old sleep data against the lunar calendar, they found something. Around the time of the full moon, those sealed-in sleepers, who could not have known it was the full moon, had taken a little longer to fall asleep, had slept about 20 minutes less in total, had shown around 30% less deep, slow-wave sleep on their brain recordings, and had lower levels of melatonin, the hormone of the dark, as if something in them was keeping a lunar rhythm, blind from inside a sealed room. And in 2021, another team, publishing in the journal Science Advances, found something that rhymed with it across a very different set of people. They tracked the sleep of communities in Argentina, including indigenous Tobacom people, some living with no access to electricity at all, some with limited electricity, and compared them with university students in a fully lit city in the United States. And across all of those groups, from people who sleep by no light but the sky to people who sleep in a glowing city, they found the same faint oscillation. In the nights leading up to the full moon, people went to bed later and slept less. The swing was small, bedtime shifting by around half an hour, total sleep by roughly 45 minutes to an hour across the cycle. And it was strongest in the people with no electric light and weakest in the city. But it was there even in the city, even under all that artificial brightness. Some old rhythm, faintly turning, in step with the moon. And if you ask how it could possibly work, how a sealed-in sleeper or a student in a bright city could be tracking a moon they cannot see, the truthful answer is that nobody is sure, and that uncertainty is itself important, so I will not paper over it. The obvious explanation, that people simply sleep worse when moonlight is coming in the window, cannot be the whole story, because the effect keeps turning up in people with no view of the moon at all, in windowless labs, under curtains, in cities where the moon is drowned out by streetlight. So if it is real, it is not just the brightness. It would have to be something more like an internal clock, a faint inherited, roughly monthly rhythm, a circulunar clock of the kind we know exists in marine creatures, somehow still running in us, ticking along in step with a moon it does not need to see, because it has, in effect, memorized the moon's schedule over evolutionary time. That is a real possibility that serious scientists take seriously. It is also possible that the signal is not real at all, that it is the kind of faint pattern that appears and disappears in noisy data, here in one study and gone in the next, and that when all the evidence is finally in, the human moon sleep effect will turn out to be nothing. Both of those are live. The honest state of it tonight is a shrug and a raised eyebrow, a small stubborn maybe their thing that the best sleep researchers in the world have not yet been able to either confirm or dismiss. And there is something fitting, I think, in ending a night about the moon on exactly that note, and not a certainty, but a genuine, open, unfinished question, the moon still keeping one last secret, the way it kept its far side for so long, hidden in plain sight faithfully, until we finally build the instrument that can see. Now, here is the honesty, and I will not skip it, because it is the whole point, and because you deserve the real state of the question, and not a tidy ending. This is not settled. It is not proven. Other large studies have looked for the same effect and found nothing. A study by a researcher named Corday and colleagues in 2014 combed through thousands of nights of sleep data and found no lunar influence at all. So the field is genuinely mixed. Some studies see a small signal, some see none. It may be real and subtle and hard to catch. It may be an artifact, a pattern the mind finds in noise, the same trick that built the lunacy myth. Honest scientists are still arguing about it, and I am not going to pretend they have finished, because they have not. What I can tell you truthfully is this: it is small, it is debated, and it is not nothing. There is a real, live, open question about whether the oldest clock we have ever known still faintly ticks in us when we sleep. And if it does, if the small signal is real and not just a pattern in the noise, there is a reason it would make sense, and it is a reason that reaches all the way back to the people we have spent this night with. For almost the entire span of human existence, the moon was the brightest thing in the night by an enormous margin, and the amount of light you had after sunset depended entirely on it. A full moon is bright enough to walk by, to work by, to hunt, or travel, or be hunted by. A dark moon left the world in true blackness. So for hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors' nights brightened and darkened in a monthly rhythm set by the moon, and a brighter night is a more wakeful, more watchful, more dangerous night. A reasonable time for the body to sleep a little lighter, a little later, a little more ready. It would not be strange at all for evolution to have tuned something in us to that rhythm. A faint circa-lunar echo laid down over all those moonlit ages, the way it was laid down in the corals and the worms. And if that echo is still in us, it would explain the small stubborn thing the sleep studies keep half finding. Sleepers in sealed rooms or in cities drowned in electric light, still faintly loosening their grip on sleep in the nights around the full moon, obeying a moon they cannot see, keeping a clock their oldest ancestors set. We flooded our nights with artificial light only a century or two ago, a blink. The moon had the previous 1,000,000 years. It would be almost strange if it left no mark at all. And that is where I want to leave you tonight. Not with a certainty, but with that. Because think about what it would mean if the small signal is real. It would mean that the thing the Sumerians got most wrong, the idea that the moon reaches down and touches the human being directly, might be, in the smallest and quietest way, a little bit right. Not madness, not blood pulled by the tide, nothing so dramatic, just this, that in the nights around the full moon, something in you, some ancient rhythm older than electric light, older than cities, older than writing, might stir and hold you back from sleep a few minutes longer and lighten your rest a little, blind to the moon from inside a sealed and curtained room. That the lamp of the night, which lit their world and steadied their calendar and terrified their kings, and is even now drifting slowly away from us. That same lamp might still faintly be in you tonight. Not as a god, not as a force that maddens or pulls, just as a rhythm, a tide of a different kind, so gentle you would never notice it, keeping time in the dark as it did in the ones who called it the first of all the gods. It will not madden you. It cannot pull the water in your body. But in the quiet, something small keeps turning up. The effect is small. Not everyone feels it. Scientists still argue about why. It may be nothing at all, or it may be the oldest clock we own, the lamp of the night, still faintly ticking in us, as it did in the ones who first looked up and named it and were afraid and could not look away. Before you go all the way down into sleep, let me do the thing I promised at the very start. The thing that is the whole reason. I would rather you drifted off to my voice than to one of the many others out there tonight telling you stories about the moon. Let me tell you plainly what of all this was true and what was not, so that you carry nothing false down into the dark with you. That the moon was the elder god, the father of the sun, the great boat of heaven, worshipped at Ur in a great brick mountain by the first poet whose name we know. That is all real, faithfully what the Sumerians believed and built. That the moon was born in a collision with a world called Theia 4.5 billion years ago is the leading scientific account, strong and well supported, but still being refined in its details. I told you it was the best story we have, not a thing known blow by blow, and that remains the honest line. That the moon keeps one face turned toward us through tidal locking, and that the far side was not seen until 1959 is rock solid. And it is the far side, never the dark side, lit as fully as any part of it. That the moon steadies the Earth's tilt, and with it our seasons and climate, is real and important. That it was required for life, or placed here on purpose to make the Earth work, is not. The steadying is physics. The placing is a modern lie in an ancient costume, and I hope I took it apart cleanly. That the Mesopotamians believed the sky was a solid ceiling of stone, 3 stacked heavens of jasper and blue and mottled red, is genuinely what they thought. And there is no such dome. The real shield over you is an invisible field of magnetism, not a wall of stone, and it is better than a wall. That they saw the eclipse as the moon god besieged by 7 demons and crowned and killed substitute kings to absorb the omen, is real and documented history, and those same watchers learned, honestly and astonishingly, to predict the very eclipses they feared, which is one of the true beginnings of science. That the moon rules the tides is Newton's truth, not the Sumerians, who lived on a gentle gulf and built no tide law. That the moon is drifting away at the speed your fingernails grow, measured by lasers off mirrors, the astronauts left. And that the days are slowly lengthening because of it, all solid, all real, all happening now. And the last one, the one about your own sleep, that one I handed you exactly as uncertain as it truly is. The moon does not madden you, that is debunked. It does not pull the water in your body. A wall in this room pulls harder. But whether the lunar cycle faintly touches human sleep is a real and open question, with some studies finding a small signal and others finding none. And I told you it was small and mixed and unsettled, because it is, and because you deserve the true shape of a question and not a satisfying lie in place of it. That is the accounting. Nothing false goes down with you. Only this which is true, that the oldest people who wrote looked up at the same moon you can see from your window, and did not know the physics, and got the facts wrong again and again, and yet watched so honestly and so long that what they saw keeps turning out to sit right beside what is really there. 2 true things, side by side, what they saw and what is actually up there, and both of them tonight are yours. So rest now. There is nothing left to follow. No 8th fact you have to stay awake for. No name you have to keep. You have done the only thing tonight asked of you, which was to lie here in the dark and let an old light move slowly across your mind. And you can put even that down now and let it set. Let the whole long sky we crossed together go loose and dim. The elder god and his boat, the hidden face, the steadied world, the stone heavens, the demons and the doomed kings, the mirrors on the moon and the moon drifting away from them. Let it all settle toward the horizon of your mind, like the moon itself settling toward morning, and let the dark come up gently over it. You do not have to remember any of it. It will be there if you want it, and if you never think of it again, that is fine too. It was only ever meant to carry you here. to this quiet, to the edge of sleep. Feel the weight of your body against whatever holds it. Feel how little it is asking of you now. No watching, no counting, no keeping of time. For all of human history, someone somewhere was watching the moon, counting its nights, waiting for its crescent, afraid of its shadow. You do not have to be that watcher tonight. The moon will keep its own time without you. It kept the months for them, and it will keep the hours for you. And you can close your eyes on it the way you would close your eyes on a lamp, left burning safely in another room, knowing it will still be there, doing its slow, faithful work, whether you watch it or not. Let your breathing go slower now, without your making it slower. Just notice it, the way you would notice the tide coming in from a long way off, each breath out a little longer than the one before, each pause after it a little wider, until the next breath arrives on its own, unbidden, the way the crescent arrives on its own after the dark nights, without anyone having to call it back. You do not have to run your own breathing any more than the Sumerians had to run the moon. It knows the way. It will keep its rhythm all night without a single thought from you. Rising and falling. Rising and falling. The oldest tide there is, the one in your own chest, keeping its faithful time while the rest of you lets go. Think, if it helps you drift, of how many people have lain exactly where you're lying now, in the dark, beneath this same moon, letting the day go. The watchers of Ur, waiting for the crescent, the scribe on the temple roof, writing down the moon against the stars, the king in hiding, and the doomed man on his borrowed throne. The first poet, Enheduanna, composing her hymns to the lamp of the night 4,300 years ago. Every one of them looked up at the same moon you can see tonight, and felt small under it, and slept anyway, and the moon kept crossing the sky above all of them, one after another, generation after generation, all the way down the long chain of the sleeping to you here, now, at the near end of it, in the dark, safe, about to join them in sleep. Let the facts go now, all of them, the way you let go of the day. You do not have to keep the collision, or the far side, or the tilt, or the demons, or the mirrors, or the drifting away. They will keep themselves. They are true whether or not you hold them, the way the moon crosses the sky, whether or not anyone is watching, and you can set them all down and let them cross without you tonight. There is nothing left to understand. There is only the warm dark and your slow breathing and the old light somewhere outside, doing what it has always done, needing nothing from you. Let your body grow heavier against the bed. Feel it giving up its weight by degrees, the small holdings on loosening one by one, the jaw, the brow, the shoulders, the hands, the way the moon loosens its hold on the earth so slowly you could never feel it go. Let everything that was tight today drift a little farther out of reach, a little farther away, receding gently like the moon itself, until it is too far off to trouble you, until the day is a small pale thing low on the horizon of your mind, setting, almost gone. You do not have to chase any of it. Let it set. Let it all set. And now let even my voice thin out and join the quiet, one more soft thing in a dark and safe room. No more urgent than your own slow breathing, something you can stop listening to at any moment without missing a single thing. I will keep talking low and even for the ones still drifting down, and it does not matter in the least whether you hear the words or only the shape of them, the way you half hear the wind, the way they half heard the gods crossing overhead. There is nothing above you tonight but open, quiet sky, no dome, no ceiling of stone, no demons in the vault, no doom written in any shadow, no waters waiting to fall. Only air, thinning gently into the dark, and the invisible shield, breathing its slow magnetic breath around the whole turning world, and the old light making its patient crossing, a little farther off tonight than it was a year ago, keeping its faithful time above you, whether you watch or not, and past all of it, the dark going on and on, with no lid on it at all, vast and calm and strangely kind, holding this one small lit world, and you asleep on it. You are safe under every layer of it, You are held by a planet, steadied by a moon that was born in fire and is drifting away too slowly to see, and none of it tonight needs anything from you at all, except that you let go and rest. So let the moon set in your mind the way it sets over the edge of the world every morning, sinking, unhurried, certain to rise again. Let the day go with it. Let the whole long sky we crossed sink softly below the horizon of your thoughts, and let the good, ordinary dark come up over everything, complete and soft and safe. There is nothing left to do now, and no one you have to be, and nowhere you have to go, until a morning that is in no hurry and is certain to come. The moon will keep crossing the sky whether you watch it or not, the way it crossed for the watchers of Ur and the scribe on the temple roof, and every sleeper in the long chain before you, and it will still be there, faithful and drifting and beautiful when you wake. You do not have to keep the vigil tonight. You can hand the night back to the moon, and close your eyes, and let it keep its own slow time above you, as it always has, as it always will, for as long as there is anyone left to look up. Feel one more time how little is being asked of you. Not to watch, not to count, not to fear, not to understand. Only to lie here and breathe and let the weight of you settle, while somewhere outside, seen or unseen, above the clouds or below the horizon, the old light goes on doing everything it does, steadying the tilt of the world, raising the far tides on distant shores, lighting the reefs where the corals wait for their one full moon, drifting its slow inch farther out into the dark. All of it, all that vast quiet machinery of the sky running perfectly well without a single thought from you. You are not needed tonight. That is not a loneliness. It is a permission. The universe will keep itself. The moon will keep itself. And you, small and warm, and held on the surface of a steadied world, are free to do the one thing the whole long night has been for, which is to stop and let go and sink down into sleep. Let your breath go slow and even, the tide in your own chest, rising and falling without your help. Let the last images loosen and drift, the boat crossing the sky, the hidden face, the stone heavens, the red moon, the mirrors gleaming in the grey dust, the lamp slowly leaving, and let them dim and set, one by one, below the soft edge of sleep. Let your jaw come unclenched, let the small muscles around your eyes go soft, let your shoulders drop away from your ears, let your hands lie open. There is nowhere you have to be, and no one you have to be for, not for hours, not until the light comes back, and the light will come back, the way it always has, the way the crescent always returned for them out of its days of darkness, faithful, on schedule, certain. Nothing that goes down into the dark tonight is lost, not the moon, not the day, not you. Morning is only the far side of this, turning slowly towards you in the sunlight you cannot see yet. If the moon is up outside your window right now, you do not even have to look at it. Let it be there, doing what it does, steadying the world a little, drifting a little farther off, keeping the oldest clock there is, and let it keep you the way it kept them. Not by pulling at you, not by touching your blood, but just by being the familiar lamp in the dark that it has always been, the first thing anyone ever looked up at and felt less alone. And now, let even my voice thin out and join the quiet, one more soft thing in a dark and safe room, no more urgent than your own slow breathing, something you can stop listening to at any moment without missing anything at all. I will keep talking, low and even, for the ones still drifting down, and it does not matter in the least whether you hear the words or only the shape of them, the way you half hear the wind, the way they half heard the gods. There is nothing above you tonight but open, quiet sky, no dome, no ceiling, no demons in the vault, no doom written in any shadow, only air and the invisible shield, and the old light making its slow crossing, and past it the dark going on, and on with no lid on it at all, vast and calm and indifferent, and strangely gentle, holding this small lit world, and you asleep on it. You are safe under all of it. You are held by a planet that is held steady, by a moon that was born in fire, and is drifting away too slowly to see, and none of it needs anything from you now except that you rest. So let the last of the day go. Let the moon set in your mind. Let the months and the omens and the mirrors and the tides all sink below the edge of thought, and let the good ordinary dark come up over everything, soft and complete. Sleep now. The sky will keep. The moon will keep. The morning is already on its way around, turning toward you in the light, and it will find you here, rested when it comes. Rest well. You are in good company tonight, you and the dark and the oldest lamp there is, keeping its slow and faithful time above you while you sleep.